Hi there, Ezra Levant is my name. I'm the president of Rebel News. You can call me the Rebel Commander. No one else really does. I'm here at our world headquarters in Toronto, but my favorite person, our chief reporter, our managing editor, and our Alberta boss is my friend Sheila Gunn-Reid, who joins us now from our Western Outpost in Northern Alberta. Sheila, great to see you.
Thanks, boss. I'm looking forward to seeing the debate tonight. I was looking at the candidates. We've got 7 candidates who have passed the threshold to be in the debate tonight, and 3 of 7 are anti-lockdown from the very beginning, and 1 is trying to rebrand himself as an anti-lockdown guy. So I am excited to see what sort of questions unfold tonight.
Yeah, it's a great point. Just for those folks who are not in Alberta or Alberta-centric, we're talking about the leadership contest to replace Jason Kenney. Jason Kenney was for many years a federal MP and cabinet minister, but then he went west and he oversaw the merger, a unite the right, I guess you could say, between the provincial PC party and what was called the Wild Rose Party, a more Reform Party style conservative party. He merged them and he became premier. And, things are rough in Alberta with the price of oil and the pandemic. It was a tough go for any premier. But Jason Kenney made a special project, a zealous vendetta, I'd say, on cracking down on any lockdown dissenters, especially Christian churches. And it was so odd, as longtime friends and fans of Kenney, who was such a champion of religious freedom for so long.
Yep.
That was actually one of his portfolios in the Harper government. He set up the Office of Religious Freedom. He criticized crackdowns on Christians in countries like China. He was quite brave and courageous and a leader. To see that man become the chief persecutor of Christian churches was shocking to many people, not just his old friends, but to Albertans who said, hang on, our provincial motto is strong and free. Hang on. We're actually the freest province in the country, but we're having the most abusive government in the country. And so it was that as Kenney turned the ratchet tighter and tighter on the churches, dissent within his own party spread and spilled over. He was never going to appeal to the NDP lockdownists, the mask patrol people, but he alienated his own base too. Christians, conservative, libertarians, get your hands off me, get your mask off me people. And he was caught in a pincer. And I think he was out of touch. I think maybe the lockdown itself stopped him from getting a dose of reality. You know, one of the great things about MPs and in the United States, congressmen and senators having to go home to their districts every week was you get a dose of reality to shake that dome syndrome out of your mind. That's what they call in Alberta, a dome syndrome. Preston Manning would call it being auto-washed if you were in Ottawa. Well, the thing is, if there's no public gatherings allowed for 2 years, if there's no churches and meetings and conferences, who are you going to talk to other than your own pals and lobbyists? And so Jason Kenney was removed from the grassroots sensibility of the people, and it ended in a party non-confidence vote. Kenney actually squeaked through with just over 50%, but it was so clearly a rebuke that he announced he would resign. Now, he is still the premier of the province and still the interim leader of the party until they find a new one. And that is what we're here to talk about tonight. I think there's 7. I think you said 7 candidates who have thrown their hat in the ring. Some were extreme lockdownists, like Kenney himself. Others come from the Wild Rose side of things, the libertarian side, the don't tread on me side. I believe that one of the main reasons Kenney is no longer premier or won't be soon is because of his treatment of the churches. Now, I would believe that because I've been talking about issues like Pastor Arthur Pawlowski for the last 2 years. And I say that as an introduction because that is one of the themes afoot today, certainly one of the ones that I care about. Sheila, give me a minute on some of the differences between these UCP candidates. UCP stands for the United Conservative Party. There's a good name. And then we're going to go to our friend Adam Soos, who's a reporter on the scene at the debate, which I believe is being hosted by our friends at the Western Standard Online. Good people. Am I right on that, in that who is the host of the debate tonight, Sheila?
No, this is the official UCP debate.
Oh, well,
This is
thank you for the
This
correction.
is the party's debate.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the correction. There's so many debates going on, and so many.
I know.
I got confused. I was in Calgary for their UCP debate. Would you forgive me? I admire our friends, the Western Standard. Sheila, give me a minute on the different fault lines. I indicated some of them: the PCs
Sure.
versus the Wild Rose, the Libertarians versus the Lockdownists. What are some of the other points of disagreement amongst these seven? And then we're going to go to Adam Soos.
Sure. So there's Leela here. She was a Wild Roser, but a more progressive Wild Roser, if that's actually a thing. So she's survived the merger of the parties and is now, one of those people that has remained. Todd Lowen, I think, is one of the most interesting characters in this race because Todd Lowen is running to be the leader of the UCP, but he was thrown out of the UCP by Jason Kenney for being one of the early and most vocal objectors within the caucus to the way Jason Kenney was reacting to the pandemic by locking down churches, by making some businesses essential and others not, by leaving the Walmarts open but closing your local corner store. He was one of the people who paid for his objections with his career. And he is running to replace Jason Kenney, who did not survive his own COVID crackdown. We've got Rebecca Schultz. I don't know all that much about her. There's Rajan Sawani. The only thing I really know about her is that her cousin is the porch pirate in the Liberal Party, George Chahal. Yeah, it's just so weird. Calgary's a small place.
Well, we got to
I
learn
guess.
more about her because we can't hang that crime, and it was a crime. We can't hang that around her neck. And listen, I'm sure we all have some cousin
accounting
that
for
were.
relatives.
Yeah, no, listen, I take your point. Well, it's very interesting. I'm 7 candidates.
Before we move on, Brian Jean is very interesting because he was the leader of the Wild Rose. He lost the leadership when the two parties merged. Brian Jean then sort of retired from politics, but he came back out when he saw what was happening with the lockdowns in Alberta. And he ran for the nomination in Fort McMurray explicitly against the party that he was running for. He was running for the UCP against the UCP policies, and he won against a Jason Kenney handpicked candidate. So there's a lot of stuff here. And then Danielle Smith, also a former leader of the Wild Rose, who was instrumental in basically destructing the party and ushering Rachel Notley into power, but she's gone on a 7-year-long apology tour. And I think she's really proven herself to be, a firm believer in freedoms and religious freedom and being left alone in small government. She's spent the last 7 years trying to make amends for what she's done.
Yeah, well, just for those, again, who don't know the Alberta history, let me give you a quick vignette, and then we're going to go to Adam Soos, who's patiently waiting on the location. So here's how it looked. You had an aging 4-decade-long government called the
44
PC.
years.
Yeah, it was 44 years, like holy moly. One of Hercules' tasks was to muck out the Augean stables that hadn't been cleaned in 40 years. Like imagine 40 years of not cleaning out stables. Well, this is a stable that hadn't been cleaned for 44 years. Hercules himself didn't clean up such a mess. So Danielle Smith was the leader of the upstart Wild Rose Party of the opposition, very principled, as you say. And then on the eve of the election, when voters had a chance to replace the 44-year rot with this principled party, she cut a dirty deal in midnight. Didn't check with anyone, didn't check both with her own party or with the public. She just announced one day, hey guys, I am folding in the opposition. We are all joining the government. You thought you would have an election with two parties clashing. Surprise, we are merging. You only have one choice, the uni party. Now, not all of the MLAs walked over with her. Some said, this isn't just a slight to party members who voted for you. This is a slight to the whole democratic notion of an opposition. There was obviously a chasm, a schism, and this midnight plan came to nothing because voters were so disgusted with it that they deposed the Conservatives and the Wild Rose and voted for none of the above, named Rachel Notley, the NDP. I personally believe that it was that betrayal, that bizarre forget about the Wild Rose Party, the Conservative Party. I don't care about parties. Just to wind up the opposition and say, guess what? I'm not going to oppose anything anymore. I cut a personal deal because I want to be in cabinet. People were so disgusted with that they destroyed both parties and gave it to Rachel Notley. And I believe it was that was the proximate cause for 4 years of socialist government in Alberta.
Before we go to Adam, we're missing a big part of the story here, and that goes back to Brian Jean. So Brian Jean decides that he's now running for the leader again, but he replaced Daniel Smith as the leader of the Wild Rose. And in that short time, I think it was about 35 days in between the election call, him becoming the leader of the party, his son dying in the middle of the campaign, and going to general election. And somehow this guy managed to pull the party out of the ashes and deliver more Wild Rose MLAs to the legislature than had been under Daniel Smith. So while she snatched government away from the Wild Rose, Brian Jean pulled off this miracle in 7 weeks to repair the party to at least as much strength as it had before.
Yeah, very true. We're going to go to Adam Soos in 30 seconds, but first tell me what's on your T-shirt, Sheila.
Oh, my T-shirt says, "I don't need a warning label," and it has a happy, healthy Alberta steer on it. And if you like this shirt, you can get it at rebelnewsstore.com, where we have a lot of pro-beef patriotism merchandise there. You know, I'm a farmer and advocate for farming and a meat evangelist, and I've got 2 separate campaigns coming out over the next couple of days where I advocate for people like me, just regular farmers who want to be left alone so that we can provide nutritious food for the world in a time of crushing grocery inflation.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? There's so much, such a bizarre war on farmers. You would think, I mean, it's as bizarre as the war on truckers. Who on earth would be against a trucker? They bring us everything we need. Who on earth would be against a farmer? They give us everything we eat. But alas, both are the realities these days. Well, the man who's been waiting patiently is our friend Adam Soos, and I'm delighted to call upon him now. Adam, great to see you. Before we go any further, tell us where you are physically. I think I see a helicopter there. Looks like some sort of an airport hangar.
You do. It is a helicopter. And in fact, if an emergency unfolds, this is the Halo sort of emergency response hangar. So we, at a moment's notice, may have to pause the debate and allow this helicopter to take off. If that happens, we'll be sure to have some cameras rolling. But we are right here in the hangar. It's an incredibly interesting location, certainly. But I think it works. It looks pretty cool. Again, like we mentioned, the official UCP debate taking place. This is mandatory for all 7 candidates. One of the first times that they're all going to be together, facing off, engaging with these ideas in a little bit of a contentious manner, not necessarily the controlled media environments that some of them prefer to dwell in.
Now, one of the last debates that I observed was the federal conservative debate that was hosted in Edmonton, and it was such a bizarre debate. They had an old liberal journalist who's now a liberal lobbyist. His name is Tom Clark. I don't know who came up with the idea of let's hire an Ottawa lobbyist for the Liberal Party, who actually was appointed by Trudeau on some project. Let's have him moderate a debate for the federal Conservatives. And he had that sad trombone sound he played, and he had like holding up
What's your
like
favorite Netflix series?
Yeah, it was the dumbest debate I think I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen some dumb ones.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what do you know about this debate in terms of who the moderator is and what the structure is? Please don't tell me they've flown in Rosemary Barton from Ottawa or some other CBC hack.
It's not Rosemary Barton tonight. Hopefully not going to be asking questions about what kind of shampoo people use. We actually have Jeff Davison, who I believe was a former city councilor. He also was one of the bosses at the Prostate Center, so a relatively serious businessman with some experience in politics, quite a bit of credibility going along with his name. So hopefully he will ask some tough questions. Certainly the folks willing to drive all the way down here to Medicine Hat, some folks clearly from in town here as well, to see this, want to see engagement on real ideas. This isn't the drama and the fan. They probably don't care what series These people are watching on Netflix. Alberta has been embroiled in, as you mentioned, pastor arrests, COVID-19 restrictions. It goes on and on. These people want to know where these politicians stand on these very serious issues. So hopefully we will get to that. If not during the scrum, which we're hoping one will be certainly available. I'm looking at people seeing if there's going to be a scrum. We're going to definitely ask those tough questions if the moderator doesn't, but we're hoping that they'll get into some of those nitty-gritty politic issues that people really care about.
Well, Medicine Hat is a wonderful city, and it's got a wonderful story behind the name and how Rudyard Kipling weighed in to save the name Medicine Hat from city elders who wanted to change it to Gasburg. Could you imagine changing it to Gasburg?
Gross.
Terrible.
Because it had so much natural gas. And he wrote a letter from London saying, how dare you? Because he loved the name Medicine Hat. He had visited. That's a little bit of Medicine Hat history for you.
He said it had all hell for a basement.
Yeah, well, you know what? I got to I'll call up his letter to the editor of the Medicine Hat News because he wrote a letter to city elders, and you can still read it now. But besides that interesting little connection to Rudyard Kipling, by far my favorite poet besides Shakespeare, Medicine Hat is an interesting place. It is an oil and gas town. There's a ton of natural gas there. That's why they wanted to call it Gasburg. It's also the city that's home to Tamara Leach, the peaceful trucker grandma who has been the target of Trudeau's harassment. It's also, as any smallish city in Alberta would be, connected to agriculture quite closely. Also more familiar and friendly to firearms. I guess what I'm saying is it's a naturally conservative place, and they care about certain issues.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What do you think?
I was going to say, 100% feeding into your point, it's also the home of someone that people suspected might enter the leadership race and did not.
Right.
But Drew Barnes, who along with Todd Lowen took a stand against COVID-19 restrictions, criticized the Kenney government, and was ejected as well. He's certainly enjoying a lot of popularity and continues to remain a bit of a tour de force and a presence within the UCP, despite the fact he has been ejected. So certainly a community that has rallied behind their representative as he truly represented him. So I'm sure we'll see him tonight. I have no doubt of that, but he's always eager to sit down, have a conversation, answer questions, and to go to bat for his constituents. So further to your point, not only conservative in its constituents, but conservative in its representation as well.
Sheila, go ahead. I've been telling stories about Rudyard Kipling and all sorts of other tangents. Why don't you ask some real questions of our friend Adam? And by the way, we understand that the debate itself is likely going to get underway at the top of the hour. Is that correct, Adam?
It's looking like, I could see maybe a couple minute delay as people come in, but they seem to be running a pretty tight ship here. Yeah. So we're hoping to get underway right away.
All right, that should be in about 10 minutes from now. Sheila, go ahead. I know you're closer to the action. You are based in Alberta. What other questions do you have for Adam on location in Medicine Hat?
Sure, yeah. Actually, Adam sort of addressed my question that I was going to ask. I think it is interesting and maybe sending a message by holding this in Medicine Hat, considering Drew was thrown out of the UCP by Jason Kenney. Have you seen Drew there, and have you had a chance to talk to him?
Not yet. I'm sure he is here, and I'm sure I will speak to him. We had a bit of they moved the media tables around. Everything's been fine in that regard, but we were basically just setting up, getting Wi-Fi connected and stuff. Now I'm live with you. As you know, I drove directly here from Edmonton for our coverage at popereports.com. So I got here straight from there, changed in my hotel room for 2 minutes. Now I'm here reporting on this. So I've not talked to anybody yet, but as you can no doubt tell, I've got my gear and I'm ready to go as soon as the debate wraps up here.
Now, what has the reception been like for you as you were there? Like sometimes these political parties can be weird about having us around, but generally the people in attendance like us. Are they treating you well?
Yeah. Sorry, someone just talking to us on the side here. Yeah, no, the reception has been incredible. Absolutely. There's absolutely no denying it. I was pulling up in the parking lot, and higher up in the UCP came over and talked to me, asked how I was doing, checked out a few chips on my windshield from the drive down, welcomed us in. There wasn't a table set up, so they ran and got a table, quick to get us Wi-Fi information, very welcoming across the board. The people we've been speaking with as well, very happy to have us here, as well as some other friendly independent media outlets who are holding these folks accountable. So yeah, we're here together covering this. Not a ton of media present, to be honest.
Naturally.
But I think there's probably seven or eight outlets here covering this. But very much, I'm not complaining. That means we get to ask more of those tough questions that people really want answers to.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. We'll talk more about the media in a second. But let me ask you one more thing about party brass. We're always popular amongst the party grassroots. We have a bit of a conservative populist flavor ourselves. But sometimes the party brass have more power than it seems. I gave you the examples of the federal conservatives and the BS decisions they made about their debate. But I also note that the party brass can change the rules. They can disqualify a candidate. On the federal level, they threw out the Patrick Brown candidacy. Now, I don't really care for Patrick Brown, but I personally would think that's a decision that ought to be up to party members. Do you sense any hangovers from the Kenney administration, shall we say? Are there people trying to put their thumb on the scale? Have you detected any inside baseball shenanigans like that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That is sort of one of the frequent criticisms from folks. They're saying Kenny's still around. He's got his fingerprint on it. I actually had the opportunity to ask him that question. I mean, his response was as expected. Of course not. That's ridiculous. You know, the one instance, and I flagged this right away. I'm sure you've probably addressed it as well. Danielle Smith has emerged as a clear front runner. And there's been concerted efforts, whether it be friends of some of these people or either remote contacts, writing Toronto Star hit jobs, calling her completely unhinged, or the latest interview she did where she basically suggested, heaven forbid, that being healthy and having a bit of a health spending account might alleviate the severe outcome associated with some diseases, which is a pretty sensible statement that every person on earth has agreed to forever. Being healthy makes you more resilient to malady. So again, there's been extensive sort of attempts to generate scandal over that. It feels very much, and I can't say that it's necessarily some of the insiders like Kenny or Taves, who is very much the inside guy alongside with Kenny as he was part of his caucus. But it seems suddenly there's this concerted effort to discredit Danielle Smith. But her ideas are clearly resonating with people, and some of them are even sort of self-evident statements that they're trying to mischaracterize. So a bit of sort of ad hominem personal attacks.
I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about the public sphere of debate and cut and thrust. I'm talking about the rules of the party. I mean, one of the things I didn't like about the Aaron O'Toole leadership and the Andrew Scheer leadership, when Aaron O'Toole ran, there were a number of candidates. One's named Jim Karahalios. There's others who's Derek Sloan. Actually, he was thrown out in a different way. That some inside club is making decisions to invalidate campaigns. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the cut and thrust in the court of public opinion.
On that note, 100%, I must say that even some of the stuff we saw under Kenny with sort of appointing MLAs and stuff, I have not seen as much of that. As far as this leadership debate, though, it seems that the people who were in the running and weren't allowed in were excluded because they didn't reach signatures or they didn't reach their fundraising targets. The fact that Danielle Smith, Brian Jean, Todd Lowen, who's literally ejected from the party, across the board, even someone like Leela here, who is very much on the far progressive spectrum, you could be a COVID dissident freedom fighter, or you could be a progressive that attends Trudeau Stampede breakfasts, and you're being allowed to share your ideas in front of the party.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah, you know, I was just poking around on the UCP website, and they've got their timelines laid out very clear. When they released the rules back in June, nothing has changed since then. There has been no hinky stuff with the rules, and as Adam points out, the people who didn't make the cut, they didn't make the very clear, defined thresholds that they needed. Unlike with the federal conservatives with strange stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of sort of questionable lawyers not having a clear idea of what the federal candidates were supposed to do when. Was it 150? Was it 180? There's a lot of lack of clarity there. None of that here. I've heard none of the people who are not running complaining. A couple sent me emails, Bill Rock, John Horseman, saying, yeah, we've decided we haven't made the cut, or we're
Couldn't make
deciding
it,
not
yeah.
to carry on. Very straightforward. So
Well,
there
that's
doesn't
good
seem
to
to be
hear.
any funny business.
Yeah, and by the way, cut and thrust, spin in the media, that's what you want. You want I remember one of the first debates of the federal conservatives that I think was hosted by True North Strong and Free or something, or the True North lobby group. The media said, oh my God, they were bashing each other so harshly. Yeah, it's a debate. Voters want to see differences sharpened so they can make a real.
It's not a CBC panel.
Yeah, they want to see. They don't want the entire spectrum of opinions from A to B, which is what you get on a, like you say, a CBC panel.
You don't want to know what book they're reading?
Yeah, so I want
serious-
to, I really want to sharpen the differences between a Pierre Poilievre and a Jean Charest, et cetera, et cetera. So I love the cut and thrust, and hopefully the format tonight will allow that. Now you mentioned some other media there. Can I ask, just out of curiosity, now I know you don't know by face every single reporter in Alberta, but you mentioned independent media. I take it our friends from Western Standard and True North are there as well. Who else is there?
I have not seen Western Standard, but True North is right beside me here. Do you want to come on and say hi? she's coming on down. Any questions for her? Come on this side, and they'll be able to pick you up. Any questions for our friend?
Oh, there you go.
Rachel
There's
from True
our
North?
friend Rachel Emmanuel. Well, give her our best regards. I don't know if she can hear us through the audio, but that's a
I
True
can
North
pass any
report.
messages along. But
Well, I'm delighted that True North is there covering this important event, and Rachel's the gal to do it.
as I was just saying, you're the gal to be here and cover it, and he's very happy to see you here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, we'll let her get back to her important work.
Hard-hitting stuff.
You know, I really am.
We'll let you get back to work.
I really
Other than,
am.
Yeah, some of the mainstream is setting up their cameras over in the distance there. They're not labeling who they're with.
Yeah.
I saw some local Lethbridge and Medicine Hat news here as well.
Yeah. How about, for example, from the Sun chain of newspapers, Rick Bell? Is he down there?
I'm surprised I have not seen him yet, but I do suspect that Rick would likely show up. And I'm sure if he does, he'll say hi. I'll pick his brain.
Yeah.
Rick's always happy to have a chat with us, so I'm expecting to see him shortly.
Forgive me for asking these questions. I suppose it's not relevant, but I do want to know who's there because I'm glad to see independent media. I think that's important. And as Sheila showed in her coverage of the Tamara Leach matter, more eyeballs often attend independent media coverage of these key events than attend mainstream coverage of those events. For example, CTV's Glenn McGregor was covering the Tamara Leach bail hearing. So was our chief reporter, Sheila Gunn-Reid, and Sheila had at least 10 times the engagement. There's a reason for that, not just that Sheila's a faster typist and and more accurate, but that people trust that we're showing you just exactly what's happening, less spin. So I'm pleased to see True North there, and I'm glad Rebel News is there. So thank you for making the journey all the way down from Edmonton to Medicine Hat. I'm guessing that was a 5-hour journey. Is that right?
A little more, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. All right. So
Happy to do it.
So if I'm correct, the stage of Podia is right in front of the helicopter. It's a great. So the
Correct,
candidates are not yet there. And you mentioned Davidson. What's his first name again?
Jeff.
Jeff Davidson is the MC.
Jeff Davidson, sorry. Yeah.
And do we know anything about the format? Like, do they engage each other directly? Is it? Do we know anything about the format tonight?
They are lined up, like literally side by side in a
Yeah.
more conventional debate narrative. Now, with 7 candidates, it can be a bit cumbersome. So I'm sure there'll be some strategies in place. But after the debacle of the Conservative bid on a federal level, I'm sure they actually want to see them engage in debate. The Western Standard event was great, but it was more of a Derek Fildebrandt speaking with the people. They want to see these people go toe to toe, see how they respond under pressure. One of the questions for some of these people who have been principled is once they're in that position of authority, like Jason Kenney, will they stick to these principles they preached, or will they fold? Will they cross the floor? Is one of the often criticisms that we're hearing, particularly with the current frontrunner. So I'm hoping that they will get into those difficult conversations, and as you mentioned, have some back and forth, because these people are going to be scrutinized, particularly as conservatives, by the media, by each other, by the NDP. If they manage to become the leader of the country, we have to see how they operate under fire.
Well, Adam, we'll let you go over your notes and prepare for things. We will come back to you the minute things. And I see there's a staffer checking microphones and going back and
Yep.
forth. So we will come back to you the moment the candidates deploy on the ground. So we'll let you prepare and get ready for that. And Sheila and I will go over some of the other issues that we think are alive. And we'll come back to you. So we're going to be on a hair trigger because we might come back to you in as little as 60 seconds. So we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.
There you have it, Adam Soos, who was covering the Pope's visit to northern Alberta and then scooching 6 hours or so south to Medicine Hat. Well, I think there's some interesting different factions. You really have different, I mean, you have the Brian Jean story, which again, there's the guy who saved the Wild Rose Party from annihilation because he would not sell out.
Yeah.
And he's had a vengeance driving him. He has been a critic of Jason Kenney. He ran, as you say, as a he helped drive the ouster of Kenney himself. So that's an interesting guy, and he's got his followers. He's got his fans. He was there in the tough times. Then you've got Danielle Smith. You called it a 7-year apology tour. Adam Soos is clearly enamored. I mean, I've known Danielle since we were in college together, and she's a persuasive communicator. But there is that small matter of betraying the entire cause. Just that. That.
Yeah.
You've got Travis Taves, really a right-hand man of Jason Kenney.
And before you go on, as I pointed out, he was in the COVID cabinet making decisions to lock down churches, now claiming that he's happy that the rule of law and civil liberties have prevailed. But he was also in the Sky Palace photo.
Yeah. And the concept of the rule of law, that means no one is above the law and no one is below the law. What does that mean? There aren't people who are so odious, so annoying, so irritating that we treat them however we feel just because we hate them. Pastor Arthur Pawlowski is not everyone's cup of tea. He has a certain volume and a certain stubbornness. And it comes from a good place, by the way. It comes from a place of someone who has witnessed as a child what it was like to grow up in totalitarian Poland and does not want to see those things again. But it's easy to dislike Pastor Arthur Pawlowski, especially if you're a genteel man of the establishment. You say, who is this noisy man? I mean, as King Henry said, who is this turbulent priest? Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest? And because he challenges power. He was beneath the law, wasn't he? He was treated in a way that no one else had been. And that Sky Palace, and if we can get the photo of the Sky Palace on the screen. For those who don't know, the Sky Palace is a nickname given to a luxurious tower in downtown Edmonton near the legislature where that was turned into a luxury apartment for a former premier, and it was a scandal. Well, look at this. This is the deck of the Sky Palace. You have to understand this is on the top of a tall building. This is as luxurious and elite as it gets. While there were bans on restaurants, while there were bans on gatherings, while there were bans on mask-free this and that, Jason Kenney, who you can see in the bottom right of that, and Travis Taves, and
right on the bottom,
Tyler Shandro,
over there,
and
the health minister.
Yeah, the health minister.
The health minister.
They were having a boozy party, white tablecloth, and if they were to go to the edge of the balcony there, they could look down and see the ants below.
They would see the weekly protesters, actually.
Yeah.
That would come to protest the lockdown preventing normal people from doing this.
But they're high on Mount Olympus, high in Game of Thrones, they would call it, in King's Landing, where the peasants were down below, but the elite, the master class, was up above. And it was while they were having this boozy white tablecloth luxury dinner in the Sky Palace that the mere people, the mere citizens of the province, were being jailed and arrested and hounded. I think that is a big issue, and people might be saying, Ezra, what are you hounding about? Why are you talking about that still? It's over, isn't it? Well, no, it's not over. They're still prosecuting people, still fining people. They just fined the Church in the Vine $80,000 for not allowing a health inspector in to come in the middle of a service. How about a health inspector to this Sky Palace dinner? Yeah. So it's not a closed chapter. There is no closure there. And there needs to be a truth and reconciliation. What actually happened, and can we come to terms with it? So Travis Taves is saying, no, it's all good, and didn't you know I was actually on your side the whole time. Todd Loewen, bit of a dissident. You might even say he's the Roman Baber of this campaign. We haven't talked about some of the other candidates like Rajan Sani, if I'm saying her name correctly, and Leela here as much. But I look forward to seeing how they operate under scrutiny. I like these debates. I want to see them as rough as possible. Because if you can't handle this debate, you are not going to handle the malevolent. Oh, it looks like they're getting ready to start. I'll cork it now. Let's go to Medicine Hat.
With them. Also of note is that the questions tonight were developed from thousands of submissions received from our membership. This leadership election is an extremely important decision for our party. We are electing a premier and the leader who will take us into the next election. Best of luck to the candidates with their efforts here tonight. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you of these important deadlines. Anyone wanting to participate in this event has to have a UCP membership by 11:59 p.m. on August 12th. Ballots will be mailed on September 2nd and must be received by October 3rd. The new UCP leader will be presented to all Albertans on October 6th in Calgary. Now, on with the show. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for this debate, Jeff Davison. Jeff is a former Calgary City Councillor and presently the CEO of the Prostate Cancer Centre. Take it away, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia. Give Cynthia a round of applause. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first United Conservative Party 2022 official leadership debate. And thank you for joining us as we broadcast to you live from beautiful Medicine Hat. Okay, tonight, we will have the 7 leadership candidates on stage to give us their positions on a series of questions submitted by you, the UCP Party membership, from across the province. Each candidate will be given an equal opportunity to speak. The order by which we address the questions from our members has been predetermined by random draw. The debate's going to go for about 2 hours in length in order to provide all candidates a reasonable opportunity to speak to you, the UCP Party members, and of course to all Albertans as we are streaming across the province. This evening, in the first of 2 debates, candidates will be asked for their views on the future of the United Conservative Party and a government led by them as Premier of Alberta. All right. Before we get started, we've got to introduce the candidates. So please, hold your applause to the ends, and then we'll give them one loud cheer. All right, here they come. Brian Jean, Travis Taves, Leela Here, Rebecca Schultz, Rajan Sani, Daniel Smith, and Todd Loewen. Give them a round of applause, everybody.
Is the feed from Medicine Hat frozen? I wonder if it is. Well,
it might be.
Service to our province.
Oh,
All
we've
right.
got it back now.
Tonight's debate
We're taking the
is
feed from
about
Medicine Hat back to it.
It's about presenting a vision for Alberta's future.
All right, it's frozen again. We're going to find a new source for that video. We should have that up within a moment or two. I'm sure we'll get it ready before the debate starts in earnest. I'm sort of excited. I'm excited to see him. I want to see him in action. I like the look of it. It is, when you have 7 people and you have 2 hours and you have a moderator, you're really not going to get a lot of talk time for each candidate. So they're going to, I wonder if they'll go for the zingers. I wonder if they'll, because you got to differentiate. You got to differentiate yourself. You got to be memorable. Remember, that's how Trump won his presidential primary. There was more than a dozen candidates. He was just the most interesting, the most shocking. I think we got a better feed. Let's see if we can go back to that right away.
For one simple reason: to give our party back to its membership, to bring back trust accountability, transparency. Now, my campaign theme is Your Alberta, Your Way. And my focus is to offer the party an opportunity to reconnect with the broader Conservative movement and all Albertans. I believe the best way to do this is with a fresh slate of ideas, firmly grounded in principles and values that we all share. I look forward to sharing many of these ideas going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen. Ms. Smith, over to you, 1 minute.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm Danielle Smith. I'm a business owner. I've been a business advocate. Listen, I can say I've been in the public eye for about 25 years. I've discussed thousands of issues. I've been right about a lot of things. I've been wrong about a few things, but that's okay. I'm not perfect. I do always try to learn from others. I try to consult broadly, and I try to keep an open discussion and a fair mind as I'm listening to people. The reason I think we're here tonight, though, is because we're trying to choose the best leader for this party. We're trying to ask the question, who is going to be the best person to stand up to Ottawa? Who is going to be the best person to take on Rachel Notley and win in the next election? And who is the best person to give you back your freedoms and to protect you?
Jeff, Canada is going down a dangerous path, and Alberta is being seriously impacted, negatively impacted by decisions made in Ottawa. We all know that. Decisions made through an ideological lens without empathy for the communities that rely on those industries, the people who rely on those jobs, the family incomes, and the customers who've been being a talk show host. We need stable and serious government in Alberta now more than ever before. I experienced this in 2007 and again in 2015 during the royalty review when investment fled the province, and that was due to provincial policy. And that was tame compared to the Sovereignty Act. Thank you.
Because I love Alberta, we cannot take the future of our province for granted. Albertans I've met say they want a leader who can unite this party, and that starts with our team to take on Rachel Notley and the NDP in 2023. That takes someone who knows that unity starts with our team, and you, our party members. Someone who is disciplined, who won't let you down with embarrassing comments, but instead someone.
Well, we're having trouble finding a video feed from that is a stable feed. I wonder if that's from the source. I mean, we are taking these feeds, I understand, from the party, so we'll keep
in 2023.
Oh, we're back.
That takes someone who knows that unity starts with our team, and you, our party members. Someone who is disciplined, who won't let you down with embarrassing comments, but instead someone who can make you, our party members and supporters, proud. Someone who can rise above the division with a vision for the future, yes, of balanced budgets, of making sure.
Well, we will continue to try and find a better feed if indeed that is the problem. It may well be. That was Rebecca Schultz. I don't know much about her other than Brad Wall endorsed her. Bit of a jab at talk show hosts, I think. Was that from her or from Rajan Sawhney? Lots of jabs there, sort of veiled jabs at Danielle Smith. Oh, now I'm not sure if I've got Sheila's mic. Let's see if we can connect again to Medicine Hat. And I'm not sure if I had Sheila's audio there. We're having quite a night. Or if it's the party, I'm not quite sure.
What a mess.
Yeah, stay with us. Stay with us.
Yeah, I think they're both taking jabs at Danielle Smith there. The embarrassing comments question made by Schultz, or comment made by Schultz, was in relation to Danielle Smith gave an interview wherein she said that, you know, she was talking to a naturopath, take that out however you want, but they were talking about early intervention and lifestyle choices leading to better outcomes for serious illnesses. And apparently that's embarrassing, even though that's literally how people died with COVID, was through lifestyle illnesses. But whatever, let's learn nothing, I guess.
Yeah, you know what, though? I think that was what Adam Soos was referring to with Toronto Star, hit pieces, etc. The thing is, you have to be disciplined. Now, the trouble for being a talk show host, which Danielle Smith was for a while, is you really do talk about every subject under the sun. Yeah. And you give your opposition research on the other side an endless choice of things. So if you made one comment 2 years ago or 5 years ago about an irrelevant matter, it can be brought against you. So it is tough to be a journalist who then jumps into politics, especially if you're an opinion journalist. Because you may have said something dumb 5-10 years ago. Oh, it looks like we've got the feedback.
Last but not least, Mr. Jean, over to you, 1 minute.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Jean, and I'm running to be the leader of the party, this great party that so many of us did so much work to start. I'm running for the leadership because I want to make Albertans the happiest, the healthiest, the most free and most prosperous people in Canada and the world. I want to be your premier to help you have more control of your life, more autonomy. As an Albertan, I've strived to serve my community, my neighbors, whether as a business owner, a lawyer, a community volunteer, a member of parliament, a party leader, or an MLA. I believe that the United Conservative Party has the best ideas and the best principles. If the UCP is led in a way that connects with normal everyday Albertans, we will have success and we will serve and lead Albertans to prosperity for many years to come. This party has wonderful people in it. We only have to renew the UCP and connect it to the wishes and the needs of Albertans, and if we do that, we will win the next election against the NDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jean. All right, thank you to all the candidates. All right, we're now going to move into the question round. So the first question is going to you, Mr. Lowen. You'll have, just a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes to answer, at which point then I'll ask you the question, who would you like to debate, and we'll go from there. All right, first topic. Topic is affordability. Let's face it, the cost of living in Alberta and around the globe is getting more expensive. Significant price increases for gas, food, heating our homes, and electricity, coupled with skyrocketing inflation, have all negatively affected Alberta families, and in particular our seniors, First Nations, and other vulnerable communities. If Alberta's primary value proposition is an affordable, high quality of life, how would you work to ensure this for everyone, and what specifically would you do
at the source? And I know this because I have other streaming, other media feeds open, and when we lose the signal, they lose the signal too. So I was worried that it was on our end. The problem is coming actually from the debate itself. I think we're I'm checking out some other media networks, and they're having the same problem, which is a bit of a snafu. You know, getting a good broadcast from a debate is pretty important. Maybe that airplane hangar wasn't really ready for primetime broadcast.
Yeah, it's I'm poking around and I see a lot of people complaining on a lot of different sources that there's lag, it's choppy, and the feed keeps dropping. So it's not us.
Yeah, you know what? And you know, these things happen. That's just life. But when you want to be government, when you want to have the aura of competence and credibility and authority, and the amount of the filing fees that these candidates have paid was 6 figures. Like it's not a $300,000 ticket like I think the federal Conservatives was, but I think it was about half that. They could afford better internet to broadcast from an airplane hangar. Cool idea to do it from an airplane hangar, but if you don't have the bandwidth, that's a problem, and it's going to be I'm disappointed.
$175,000.
Yeah, so you got 7 people at $175,000. You got more than $1 million to make the leadership contest sing, and I'm disappointed, Sheila, because I am not very familiar with all of these candidates, and it's not just because I'm not physically in Alberta. Some of them are not high-profile people, and I was looking forward to getting to know them, getting to see them clash. And because of technical problems on the party side, we're not given that opportunity. So I'm a little disappointed. It looks like we might have a connection again. Let's see if we can get audio out of Medicine Hat.
Fuel tax in this province, saving every Albertan 13 cents a litre every time they fuel up. Number one, I would make that program permanent. In Alberta, we can do that. All Albertans can benefit from an owned resource because our revenues are not jeopardized as our royalty income offsets any tax that we might lose in that program. The other thing I will do, and that is I will scrap the GDL for young Alberta drivers. Right now, 500,000 young Alberta drivers still have their GDL. That means that program's not providing any safety to our roads. What it does do, it adds $150 of cost to every young Albertan and requires them to do another road test. I would scrap that immediately. I will also bring forward a child tax credit that will work effectively like expanding the personal exemption on your tax return. That will provide every family with $2,000 of additional deduction or tax credit for every child. At a time when many families are really pushed and stretched to make the end of the month, that will provide real relief.
All right. Okay. That ends the first part of the question. We're now going to go into 4 minutes of open debate between Mr. Taves and Mr. Lowen. Mr. Lowen, kick us off.
Okay, so Mr. Taves, I guess one thing that I think is concerning to Albertans is the $4 billion in COVID spending that the Auditor General wasn't able to figure out. So I think we need to have some answers on that. And when I look at this government's record, again, we're sitting here in $112 billion of debt. I don't see that there's been a plan to pay down that debt and start cutting back on those interest payments. So I would like to hear some more information on that. I think that we're in a situation now where we've watched this train wreck coming slowly, and now we're in a situation where when you compare our debt compared to the federal debt, and on an individual basis, we're just as high or higher. And that's, I think, alarming for Albertans that are working hard and doing their best to support their families and living within their means. And we have a government that hasn't been living within its means. We complained about the NDP and how their budget was so high, and we complained about their spending when we were in opposition. But here we are spending 10% more than the NDP did.
I think there's an opportunity. Ready to jump in, Mr. Taves. Yeah. Feel free to jump in anytime.
All right.
This is open debate.
Good. All right. Well, thank you. Here, first thing on the Auditor General report. Number one, there's no $4 billion that are missing. The Auditor General gave the Government of Alberta a clean audit report. For all of you in the room that know what a clean audit report is, that means there are no funds missing, not $1. And yes, we have brought fiscal discipline to the province. I, as the Minister of Finance, brought fiscal discipline to this province. We had a $10 billion overspend, a spending addiction, inherited from the NDP and previous PC governments, if I'm honest. We have narrowed, in fact, by this fiscal year, we will have eliminated that $10 billion overspend. That was job number one in putting this province on a sustainable fiscal trajectory. Because, friends, we balanced the budget not on $100 oil. We balanced it on $70, $69, and $66 oil by bringing fiscal discipline to the province's finances and positioning this province for investment attraction, economic growth, which results in expanded fiscal capacity. That combination has allowed me as the Minister of Finance to present a balanced budget through all 3 years of the fiscal plan. Finally, putting this province on a sustainable fiscal trajectory.
Let's let Mr. Lowen jump in here. What have you got to say about
that? Okay, Mr. Taves, I appreciate your coming on side with the GDL. I think that's actually a really good idea. But I think what a lot of people are wondering, when we have a musing about a PST, I think Albertans are very concerned about that. I am against, and I never have been in favor, and never even mused about a PST like you have. And I think that's something that should be cleared up right away, that this government will not put forward a PST on Albertans. I think that's very important. That's something we'd talked about a lot, and I think we've defended that a lot. But now we have a couple of candidates up here that have talked about the PST, and I think we need to set the record straight.
And I'll set it straight.
All right, so go ahead.
And I will set the record straight. There's only one leadership hopeful that I'm aware of on this stage that has not only mused about a PST, but actually advocated for a PST. And Todd Lowen, that's the leadership hopeful standing right next to you. I have never mused about a PST. Look, if you want to know what I would do as Premier, look at what I did as Finance Minister. I balanced the budget by actually reducing business taxes. I balanced the budget by bringing fiscal discipline to this province.
Let's get a quick rebuttal in here. Let's get going.
But you did also muse on the PST. And as far as the $4 billion, could you explain where it went? I mean, the Auditor General said that there was no records of where it went. Where did that go?
The Auditor General gave the province a clean audit report. It was recorded.
But that doesn't tell us where the money went.
Spending, full stop. It's all recorded and accounted for properly.
All right. Okay, so that ends the first round of open debate. That actually went a little smoother than I thought it would be. There was no throwing. That was perfect. Okay, so we've had a few folks put up their paddle. That means we've got 45 seconds to chime in. I have Ms. Zahir, Ms. Schultz, Ms. Sani, and Ms. Smith. Is that the correct order? Anybody else? All right. Okay, let's go ahead. Ms. Zahir, 45 seconds. Sorry.
Thank you so much. First of all, there's many people on this stage that were part of government. There is no I in team. We do these things together. If we're going to build this team, let's start talking about how we did these things collectively. Second of all, yes, reindex tax benefits. We need to catch up for the past years, but you also need to notify the CRA to reduce the tax withholding on Albertans and the paychecks. That actually leaves more money in your pockets. Our government has not kept up with pace with inflation, and for that we actually owe you an apology. So we need to reindex AISH, Alberta seniors benefits. We have to catch up and move forward. I would like to also present an opportunity for small business tax thresholds, index of inflation. Women-run, Indigenous-run businesses, farmers, manufacturing, New Canadians are growing at amazing rates, including probably faster than Alberta.
That's 45 seconds there. I know it's fast. Thanks, Ms. Zahir. Okay, Ms. Schultz, 45 seconds to you.
I was the first candidate to bring forward a platform on affordability because it is the number one issue I hear from Albertans. Invest in kids' activities, yes, I love that idea. We committed to it first. Getting rid of the small business tax, starting for 2 years so that small businesses know that they're respected, they're the backbone of our community. I absolutely think we need to continue fuel tax relief and re-index personal income taxes. I was also the first candidate to put forward a plan for what to do with the surplus, 35% into debt repayment, 35% in saving for our future, and 30% to address affordability needs. Now, I would say the same. One person does not balance a budget. As a minister who worked hard to transform every area of her ministry to do better by Albertans, not only in the types of programs we offer, but the amount of dollars we invest.
That's it. That's 45. I know it's fast. All right, Ms. Sani, 45 seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you. And yes, of course, affordability is on top of mind for most Albertans. And these issues with inflation hit middle-class, hardworking families the most. And I had announced earlier on, several weeks earlier, that I was planning to ensure that we index income tax brackets and we index social support such as seniors benefits and AISH recipients as well, because again, vulnerable communities are also hit very, very hard with the inflation rates that we haven't seen these rates since the early 80s. I also want to make a comment about GDL. While it is a good policy on paper, I would have to say that it sounds like there has been limited consultation done because driving schools would be impacted very severely with this kind of policy.
All right. Ms. Smith, over to you, 45 seconds.
All right, as I said, as a columnist over 25 years, I've mused on a lot of issues, and I want to put into context my musing. It was when we were at $24 billion in a deficit. We only had $2 billion worth of resource revenue. I think when you have those circumstances, it's no surprise that the Premier and the Finance Minister and I were talking about how do we solve that problem. Fortunately, resource revenues have bailed us out again, notwithstanding what the former Finance Minister said. We have a $4 billion surplus. That's great. We've got $16 billion worth of resource revenue this year. That means we have a $12 billion structural deficit that we still haven't solved. I wrote a major paper for the School of Public Policy that had several elements about how we would restructure, how we would create house spending accounts so that we could address this issue and grow our Heritage Savings Trust Fund.
That's time. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, first question out of the way. No takers on any other things? All right. Okay, we're going to move on. Question 2. This question is for you, Ms. Smith. It has to do with the environment. Conservative Albertans are often villainized as not caring about the environment despite having a track record of clean and ethical energy production that supports a healthy Canadian economy. The opposition targets Conservatives with negative rhetoric around GHG reduction, decarbonization, net zero policies, and adaptation of physical planning, all under the umbrella of a climate emergency, spending billions without any defined outcomes. Alternatively, most Conservatives would say they care a great deal about the environment today and what they will leave behind for generations to come. Albertans value our clean air, lakes, outdoor spaces, trails, and mountains, to name a few. What would you do to change the narrative around this negative environmental stereotype, and what specific targets would you strive to achieve in order to create a greener, more sustainable Alberta? You have 2 minutes.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I remember getting hit by Graham Thompson years ago in 2012 when I talked about how the science wasn't settled on climate change. And I can tell you what I've come around full circle on that. I am now probably the first and early adopter of thinking that we can hit a net zero target and we can get there faster than anywhere else. And I'll tell you why I believe that. Number one has been the incredible innovation that we have seen among our entrepreneurs and in the business community. And we as Conservatives have always believed that technology was going to be the answer. And I can tell you it is the answer. Whether we capture the CO2 and bury it underground, or whether we turn it into useful products like carbon nanofiber, which can be a replacement for steel, cement, so we can make a more durable construction material, plastics. We can also turn it into industrial minerals that can be turned into soap. My favorite one is you can turn it into alcohol. There is a company called Airco that takes a pure stream of CO2 and makes it into vodka. Now you can just imagine the marketing opportunities on that one. So when I look at the challenge that we have, that is the message that we have to get out there, is that we have immense pore space in Alberta that will allow us to capture CO2. Our conversion of our economy to a hydrogen economy is already well underway with this government. We're building a hub in the Edmonton area. If we start building hydrogen fueling stations all over this province, we'll be able to change over our long-haul vehicles to be hydrogen-based. Then we will be able to be a hub for the construction of hydrogen vehicles. Why not attract Toyota here so that they can build their Toyota Mirais? Why do we have to wait for Ottawa to be the center of the auto industry? We can be the center of auto manufacturing here. But that's not the only issue. Once we get the issue of CO2 out of the way and people see that we are serious about solving it and getting there faster than anywhere else, we also have to tackle the issues of air quality, of water quality, of making sure that we're doing habitat protection, which our farmers and ranchers do so well, and I can't wait to sell that message.
All right, thank you. Okay, who would you like to debate on this topic?
I would like to debate Rajan Sani.
All right, Ms. Sani. Again, the question was, what would you do to change the negative, or the narrative around this negative environmental stereotype, and what specific targets would you strive to achieve in order to create a greener, more sustainable Alberta? You have a minute and a half.
Thank you. Well, there are a number of areas that we need to look at, but I'm going to talk about energy specifically. The reality is that even Canadians across this country have a very negative perception of Alberta. They think of us as rich emitters. And before we can tackle the issues with security of supply, we need to make sure that we have more information out all across the nation to ensure that Canadians understand that Alberta energy is the cleanest, most ethical source of energy absolutely in the world. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about as it relates to energy, because we talk quite a bit about transition in energy, and there are two aspects that we have to keep in mind. We've already talked about hydrogen, that has been mentioned. We have ample natural gas resources here in Alberta, and that can translate into hydrogen supply. We are still working on the demand portion of that equation, and that was some of the work that I was doing as Minister of Transportation. Now, going to LNG, I thought that we had missed the boat on LNG, but that's actually not true. Because of the geopolitical situation that we are seeing right now in Europe, we know, again, security of supply is on top of mind for everyone, and Alberta is, again, on the cusp, uniquely positioned to be the supplier of natural gas for LNG. But what concerns me is when we start talking about things like the Sovereignty Act, that is the number one thing that is going to drive investment away from our province.
All right, I got to cut you off there. I'm sorry. I know a minute and a half is tough. It's all tough. It's hard to get everything you want to say in a couple minutes. All right, let's start 4 minutes of open debate. Ms. Smith, I'm going to start with you. And if I have to, I'll force back and forth 30 seconds so that we kind of make some points and allow some rebuttal time.
You got it. I'd love to talk more about the Sovereignty Act because it's absolutely essential to getting our...
Well, let's keep this one on the environment.
I will. It's absolutely essential to getting our products to market because what I would like to see is us take the lead on developing economic corridors. We have been waiting since the 1930s for Ottawa to develop economic corridors. It's been almost 100 years. They are not going to develop economic corridors for us. But we've got such a huge opportunity to partner with our First Nations community. We've got the treaty settlements that have happened in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. There's a group of 14 First Nations that want to take the lead on developing an economic corridor. And it would be 10 kilometers wide. And the nice part about it is by making it wide enough, you can take care of your caribou habitat. You can make sure that you're doing your landowner protection. You can identify endangered species and habitat and wetlands, and you can take care of that as well. But then you can also develop
I'm just going to jump in here because I just want to
All
say
right, let's
that,
let Ms. Sani come in.
yeah, we don't need an unconstitutional, impractical Sovereignty Act to develop economic corridors. In fact, that work is already underway. As the Minister of Transportation, this was one of my key priorities, and I worked with MLA Shane Getson on this, because what happened when we had the BC storms and those highways and bridges were decimated, all the traffic came through Highway number 3. And that is why one of the first things that I did when I interacted with the federal government was to tell them that we need to develop that economic corridor. That's an agri-food corridor. And I applied for monies through the National Trade
I'm
Corridor
going to go back here
Funds.
for a minute, because the question is on the environment, right? We're looking for tangible pieces to move forward in terms of how do you change that negative stereotype, right? And what specific targets are you going to move forward with to achieve a more sustainable, greener Alberta? So I'll keep it focused there. That's a big membership question.
Part of that conversation is ensuring that we're maintaining investor confidence, because if we are going to invest in greener technology and we are going to encourage people from across the globe to come to Alberta, for example, if we want to invest in high-speed rail that could be powered by hydrogen-powered locomotive, that investor confidence needs to be maintained. Any work that you want to do on environmental initiatives requires bringing investment in, and it requires being entrepreneurial, and it requires supporting our local residents as well. But if we have a situation where we have a candidate who is inviting a situation of turmoil, of chaos, and inviting investors to stay away from our province because we're too politically risky, that is a problem, not just for the environment, for energy and agriculture.
Ottawa has created chaos. Ottawa has cancelled our projects. Ottawa has caused Energy East and Tech Frontier Mine and tens of billions of other projects to be cancelled. The reason these are linked is because part of our strategy in reducing greenhouse gas emissions is exporting our clean LNG to displace coal in India and China. We cannot do that because Ottawa keeps standing in our way. We need to build economic corridors. We need to take the lead on that. We need to work with our First Nations. We need to take the lead on solving the environmental issues so that we can get our product to Churchill, to Thunder Bay, to Tuktoyaktuk, to Port-au-Prince Rupert. And we have to exert our sovereignty to do that, because Ottawa is not going to do it for us.
With Ottawa, absolutely, and that fight is long, it's arduous. There are no shortcuts, people. There is no magical Sovereignty Act or any other legislation that is going to let us bypass those very difficult steps. The problem is when we shoot ourselves in the foot with provincial policies like a Sovereignty Act. That is creating a politically risky environment, and that is going to impact everything, exactly what I said earlier, environmental initiatives, energy initiatives, agricultural initiatives. This is tantalizing. The act, it's seductive, it draws you in, but it is an illusion. And my question is, what are you going to do when you can't deliver what you're trying to sell?
All right, okay, that ends our 4 minutes. It's getting hot in here.
Getting hot.
All right. As far as paddles go, Mr. Taves, you put up your paddle there. I noticed you. 45 seconds on the clock for you. Go ahead.
All right, good. Thanks, Jeff. I have to agree with Ms. Sani on this one. Implementing the Sovereignty Act, simply, we can't wish all of Ottawa's obstructionism away by waving the magic wand on the Sovereignty Act. I agree. A Sovereignty Act, the way it is proposed, would ultimately bring a lack of predictability and uncertainty into this province that would drive investment out. Look, we've made great progress in the last 3 years. Alberta will lead the nation in economic growth this year and next. We cannot unwind that. We don't win when we operate from a position of weakness. Now, what we need to do, we need to sell what we do already. We have the most responsible energy and agriculture industries in the world. We need to sell their responsibility because the world needs more Alberta energy and Alberta agriculture.
All right, thank you. Right on time. Were there any other paddles that I missed? Nobody? Going once? All right, twice. Let's move on here. Question 3 is for Ms. Sani. All right, it's on healthcare reform. The COVID-19 pandemic placed enormous pressure on health systems across the country and around the world. Canada's premiers say it is intensified pre-existing fractures in health systems all across the country, and that we're now at a critical point. The premiers are asking the federal government to increase the Canada Health Transfer to help ensure we all have access to high quality and timely health services. With specifics, as leader, how would you ensure that Albertans get the tests, procedures, and health services they need when they need them? Ms. Sani, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Jeff. Excellent question, because healthcare is another issue that's been on top of mind for Albertans. When I launched my campaign, one of the first things I did was to indicate that I will launch a transparent, open inquiry into the pandemic response, because we have done a number of things right in this response, and we have done a number of things wrong. We all know that, and there are a diversity of opinions on this matter, and we need everyone to come to the table to discuss that. The outcome of that inquiry will show us where the gaps are in the healthcare system that arose as a result of the pandemic. So that is number one. Number two, my intention is to repair relationships with doctors, physicians, healthcare workers, nurses, because we cannot move forward in any significant fashion on any kind of healthcare reform if we don't have those who are central and intrinsic to the system at the table. Many of you know that your physicians are community leaders as well, and we have to stop this war with the physicians. Number three, I think everybody in this room will agree that there are issues with Alberta Health Services. We know that. I was in rural Alberta not too long ago in a room full of elected officials, and there was a big screen on the TV with a representative from AHS. He told everybody in that room that there is nothing to see here. You have what you need, and you have enough doctors. The data shows it. There was a woman, several people actually, who are crying in that room. She said to me, I will die in this community because first of all, we won't get an ambulance. And secondly, if an ambulance does come, there will be no doctor at that hospital. So Alberta Health Services is an inverted triangle. It needs to be flipped. It's too top-heavy, and one of the comments that came out actually from physicians in Edmonton was that maybe we need to move back to regional boards. There are many aspects of AHS that need to be dismantled.
All right, that's 2 minutes. Who would you like to debate on the healthcare topic?
Ms. Danielle Smith.
All right, Ms. Smith, I'll repeat the question one more time for you. All right, well, let's settle down, folks. With specifics as leader, how would you ensure that Albertans get the tests, procedures, and health services they need when they need them? You have 1.5 minutes.
Sure. I just want to take a moment to clarify a comment I made in a podcast last week about cancer that was misunderstood. I know that cancer can strike anyone at any time without any relation to lifestyle, especially kids. But not just kids. It happened to my mother-in-law too. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and only survived 3 months after diagnosis. And by the time they found out, she was so malnourished that they weren't able to continue her chemo treatments. That's why I became such a proponent of early detection, early treatment, nutrition, and holistic medicine. There are so many more options. If you diagnose early, then you can treat early. And that's what I was trying to say, albeit very awkwardly. But it's in that vein that is why I proposed health spending accounts, because we spend so much money on the back end when people have a disease that manifests, and we spend no money on the front end on prevention to keep people well. And so if we were to establish health spending accounts with $300 in it, we'd all be able to deal with the trauma of the last 2 years. Mental health, counseling, nutrition, dietitian, naturopathic doctors, chiropractors, physiotherapists. If we can start spending some money at the front end, I think it's going to be transformative in the system, and we will save money as people are not going into the system. And when we get into fall respiratory virus season, we're going to make sure that we have enough room to be able to handle that surge in patient load. That's the first step I'd take.
All right, thank you, Ms. Smith. All right, let's start the clock for 4 minutes of debate. Ms. Sani, kick us off.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Ms. Smith, for your clarification of your comments, but I'm sorry I'm not buying it because you made a subsequent video where you actually doubled down on your perspective, and the reality is that those comments are very hurtful to any Albertan, any Canadian who has lost somebody from cancer, or anybody who is suffering from cancer right now. There's another aspect to cancer that I want to talk about right now. When I had launched, I had talked about mental health supports. It's a reality that many cancer survivors experience debilitating depression after their treatments. So to the comments that were made basically diminishes the experience of cancer survivors and their families. And I want to know, when are you going to apologize to Alberta for the comments that you made?
I did apologize because I was clearly misunderstood. One of the main points I wanted to make as well, I've been talking with I-Corps Blood Services. They have, and I mentioned this in the podcast as well, they have a test of $1,300 that would allow us to look at biomarkers in the blood. I think every one of us who've had a loved one die of cancer have always said, gosh, if only we caught it earlier. The reason we say that is because we know that when you catch it earlier, there are far more treatment options. That was the intention of what I wanted to say. I know that that I-Corps Blood Services has approached the government to see if they would fund a pilot program into this $1,300 test. You know what? If I was Premier, you bet, absolutely I would. Because I know that if somebody has a pre-existing condition, if they have some kind of genetic predisposition towards cancer, if they're beginning to see early symptoms, it will be the very best way for us to diagnose, and then we can get them the wraparound services that they need, the nutrition, the exercise, the additional support, as well as traditional chemotherapy and surgical intervention and radiation.
Okay. Excellent. I'm just going to jump in here because clearly you've had time to think about this and think it through after the outcry from your original remarks. And if the apology was indeed delivered, then that is great, but I think it needs to be clarified because I have doctors and physicians and former stakeholders from community and social services telling me that this kind of rhetoric is harmful. It's harmful to Albertans. And Ms. Smith, you have a platform. You are an influencer. You have people who listen to what you say. Those kind of irresponsible comments actually speak to me that there is an issue with impulsiveness here, and there is an issue with somebody who is making rash statements holding this public platform. So let's move on to the healthcare spending account. I was talking about mental health. Anybody in this room who has ever been to a counseling session knows that $300 will pay for a session and a half. I actually have grave, I guess I'm very skeptical about this healthcare spending account. What do you do when somebody goes to the naturopath and they have 1.5 appointments? That is not enough. You're just getting your consultation and you're just getting started on your next half of an appointment.
Well,
what do you do when
right
that
now,
healthcare spending account is exhausted?
You know, right now, our public service, our government has negotiated with our public service. They get a $950 health spending account. You bet. I'd love for every Albertan to have the same level of support on health spending accounts that we give to our public service. And that's the reason why I'm advocating for it now. Maybe it starts with $300. Maybe it only allows you to take your child in to get 4 treatments from a counselor or a psychologist. But that's going to be a good start, and it's certainly better than nothing. When we look at what happened over the last 2 years of COVID lockdowns, and I haven't heard any apology from any of the cabinet ministers who imposed that on us for the last 2 years. I'd like to see an apology there. When we look at what happened over the last 2 years...
All right, audience. Okay.
What did we talk about, folks? I get it. But let's not take away time from the candidates. This is about healthcare reform, not what happened in the past, okay? So remember, we're all on the same team here, okay? All right, carry on, Ms. Smith. Sorry about that.
I'm just going to jump in. It's easy to make kind of remarks when you've never been in government at that capacity and you haven't had to make those tough decisions.
I stood up.
But nonetheless,
All right, folks, settle down or Jeff's going to stand up again.
Mental health should be funded much more than $300.
All right, that's it, folks. All right. Okay, we've got a few people that want to jump in here. Ms. Schultz, I saw your paddle first, then is it here? Mr. Taves?
You know, I would agree actually with a lot of what Ms. Zani had said. You know, we do have to focus on transforming AHS. I was the first candidate to release my plan. I don't believe that going back to regional boards is necessarily the answer, but what is the answer is going back to local decision making. And instead of a government of panel, review, and committee, we go back to listening to the front lines. Whether that was in Claire's home, where I heard nurses give me ideas about how we could do better staffing if those decisions weren't made in Calgary and Edmonton. Physicians in Edmonton who could save us $20,000 a day by allowing them to be innovative instead of squabbling about their salaries. We do have to be careful of the words that we use, because I would say this: bad judgment, flippant comments erode trust in our government, and that is not helpful in 2023.
All right, thank you, Ms. Schultz. Mrs. Here.
Thank you so much. I would like to bring forward a different thought process. We have an opportunity to triage here. We have nurse practitioners, and we also have something called a physician assistant, which has been around since 2013. If we fund these opportunities, these folks could actually be a gateway into doctors and absolutely being able to cover the gaps, particularly in rural areas. And I think it's really important when candidates are speaking about rural health that you speak to rural MLAs and that you speak to rural folks. When we're talking about women's care, SARS nurses, domestic violence, sexual assault, making sure that we have access to cultural sensitivity. There hasn't been one comment up here talking about the multicultural people in this province and the absolute barriers there are to folks having health care. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Taves.
Good, thank you. Healthcare's failing in rural Alberta, full stop. That's my experience in the Northwest, and that's what I hear from Albertans right across the province. Now, I don't pretend to have all the answers around healthcare, but I've made some observations in the last 2 years. Number one, AHS needs complete restructuring, and we have to decentralize their decision-making structure. That structure right now is not only failing Albertans, it's failing our frontline healthcare professionals, and that's tragic. I have to agree with a couple of the other speakers as well. There were some very irresponsible comments made this last week around cancer and around healthcare. We have to be accountable for our language. Our words matter. That's the value of a leadership race right now, so conservatives...
All right, I'm going to stop you there. All right, Mr. Jean, go ahead, please. 45 seconds.
The system's broken. I always find it amusing when people from Calgary and Edmonton tell me how our health system is going. I'm from Fort McMurray, and I'll tell you, we haven't had a healthcare system there for years and years and years. Well, I'm from the other forgotten corner. That will change if I'm Premier. We need to do things, and we don't need to blow up HS. What we need to do is work with the great doctors and nurses that we have and the technicians that we have and make things better. The Auditor General in 2017 actually set out how we need to fix it. Specifically said, it's not an issue of cost, it's not an issue of money. You are not going to fix it by throwing money at it. I've lived it. We need to focus on outcomes for patients and have the money follow them. But Danielle,
all right, that's
very
45
disappointed
seconds.
in you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jean. We're going to have
comments
to
on
stop there.
cancer.
All right, okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to come back to you for 30 seconds after. Mr. Lowen, floor is yours, 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree that with others that the system is broken. We need an investigation into what happened with the COVID response. I have colleagues here that were in the COVID cabinet, and now that it seems the public tide is changing, that all of a sudden they're trying to distance themselves from the decisions that they made there. I agree also that throwing money at it isn't going to solve the problem. We have an AHS system that needs a severe renovation. They've had 15 years to get it right, and they've been failing all the time. We have a shortage of healthcare workers. We have emergency rooms being shut down in rural Alberta. We have a post-secondary system in Alberta that doesn't graduate the needs of our society when it comes to healthcare workers and other educational opportunities. And we have a college of physicians that isn't helping either. We need to get the test done and the treatment done that we need.
All right, that's zero, Mr. Lowen. Thank you. All right. You got called out there, Ms. Smith. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just rebut that, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
Well, you know, I invite people to listen to my full podcast. This is the reason why, even though Rajan doesn't think there's value in being a talk radio host, I can tell you there is. I can tell you I wouldn't be given a snow job by Alberta Health Services when they tell me I should jail pastors and shut down businesses and mask kids and tell them they can't go to school and create the mental health crisis that they did and bring in vaccine passports when they said they wouldn't do that. I would have consulted broadly and made sure that we didn't make those kinds of mistakes, because we will be dealing with the consequence of that for decades.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's get set for another question. All right. Stop clapping over here. You're going to make Jeff have to stand up again. Nobody likes that. All right. Thank you. Rebecca Schultz, this question is for you, and it is on the federal government. All right. Collaborative relationships with other orders of government are often the key to funding large-scale capital programs, providing sustainable sources of base funding for projects such as transit initiatives, and are generally beneficial to driving solutions that benefit all Albertans. However, the majority of Albertans feel the federal government is determined to make life difficult for our economic prosperity and are intentionally causing division between Albertans and other Canadians. How would you, as leader, address topics such as Bills C-21, 69, and equalization payments with the federal government in order to effect a better outcome for Albertans? And I want to hear specifics here, tangible, actionable items. All right, you've got 2 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This is something I hear every day in every corner of this province, that Albertans absolutely want a leader and a government who will defend our constitutional rights. We are not asking for anything special. We are just asking for fairness in the Constitution. Now, I am, in fact, the only candidate on this stage that has successfully negotiated with the federal government and Justin Trudeau. Was that easy? Absolutely not. It took a lot of hard work behind the scenes. I was not about to leave $4 billion in Albertans' hard-earned tax money sitting in Ottawa to invest in parents and families right across this country and not invest in parents here. I don't believe that Albertans would have been okay with that, and that's why we went toe-to-toe with Justin Trudeau to make that happen in a way that respected small business and incorporated parent choice. I am the only person standing on stage who is able to do that. And I do believe in collaborative working relationships. In fact, when I look at my campaign launch, I not only had my local city councillor, but my local MP standing there in the room, because I do believe teaming up and working together on issues will get us a lot further than going at it alone. And that would be my approach, Jeff, when you're asking specifically on those bills, C21, C69, and overcoming equalization changes that we are not the only province that wants to see changes to. However, our approach has been to write letters, angry tweets, light our hair on fire, run around creating chaos, making headlines, and not getting results for Albertans. That's what Albertans are tired of. It is, and I would rather go at it with an army of other provinces than going at it alone, as what others may see as Alberta being angry. And you know what? For you Albertans who are angry, I hope you know that I'm angry too, and I hear you. I see it in every area where the federal Trudeau Liberals are trying to push and infringe on areas of provincial jurisdiction. We can't let them do that. When it comes to the emissions cap, let's be clear, production is absolutely provincial. We got to fight.
I got to stop you there. Okay. Who would you like to debate on this topic?
Danielle Smith, please.
All right, Ms. Smith, you're back up. You're going to have a minute and a half to address the question. How would you, as leader, address topics such as Bill C21, 69, and equalization payments with the federal government in order to effect a better outcome for Albertans? And again, we're looking for some specifics here.
I know we've been passive for so long that we tend to forget that the Constitution actually gives us sovereignty in the matters that are enumerated to us. If you go onto Wikipedia and they talk about our parliamentary system, that's what they say about Canada, is that legislatures in Canada are sovereign in matters that are enumerated to them. If you look up section 92, 92A, 93, 94, and 95, and I read them frequently, you will see that we have allowed the federal government to walk all over us in every single area of our jurisdiction. And with due respect to Rebecca, I know she did a good negotiation, but we still lost. We always lose when we go up against Ottawa. They take all of our money and they dribble it back with conditions. They steal the rest and they use it to win votes in Quebec and Atlantic Canada. And on the childcare proposal, you probably saw the CBC story a couple of days ago from our private childcare operators. They're now forbidden from expanding their operations. When they have a profit, it's called an overage, and they have to go to the bureaucrats to get permission on how to spend it. They're not allowed to use any of the money for their capital projects, so many of them have invested in buildings, and now they're not able to use any of the money for that. I don't look at that as a win. Implementing Justin Trudeau's socialist daycare system and squeezing out the private daycare operators that vote for us looks to me like a step backwards, and it's exactly the reason why we have to draw a hard line, say our jurisdiction is our jurisdiction under the Constitution, and stay out of our lane.
All right.
That's what the Sovereignty Act would do.
Smith. You'll get to bring up the rest here. All right, audience, let's not start again. Let's not start, folks. Come on.
We got a lot to get through tonight. Every time we do this, I've got to stop and turn around. So let's just dial it back for a minute, all right?
Okay, 4 minutes, open debate. Ms. Schultz, we'll start with you.
I mean, I would say this, when it comes to childcare, we have private operators every single day that are grateful that we kept their businesses open and included in this plan. We also, an article in the Financial Post, if we want to quote the media, highlighting private operators from other provinces right across this country saying that they wish we had a fair deal. What would you have done, Ms. Smith? Leave out Alberta parents and families? Right, what you're doing right now is writing checks you can't cash and making promises you can't keep. That Sovereignty Act that you are running on, Ms. Smith, is a great fear for our energy industry. They think that creating chaos is going to create additional investment uncertainty. It's going to drive Albertans' investment, jobs out of this province. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of additional economic uncertainty and additional economic crisis and constitutional crisis 6 months before an election, which will in fact deliver us an NDP government. That is what has our industry worried. They want us to sit down and have smart negotiations. You said it yourself. They are leaders in environmental emissions. We need to back them up.
Ottawa's created the chaos. I sent out an FAQ. I encourage Rebecca to read it, about what the Sovereignty Act would say. It would say, given that the Constitution recognizes 92, 92A, 93, 94, 95 are our areas of jurisdiction, and given that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms obligates us to protect the rights and freedoms of our citizens, therefore we will not enforce any federal policy that violates Alberta's constitutional rights or the rights of our citizens. It actually imposes lawfulness on a lawless Ottawa. Ottawa is the one who started the constitutional war with us when they told us in November of 2015 that we would not be allowed to sell our products in the open market with Bill C-48 and Bill C-69. And we've been trying to play footsie, we've been trying to get social license, we've been writing stern letters, we've been going to the court.
That's actually not true at all. When it comes to Bill C-69, there are 9 other provinces in this country that are standing up and supporting Alberta in that fight. And that's why I am confident in that system. We absolutely have to stand up and defend Alberta's rights. And I will say there are aspects of the Sovereignty Act that do make sense. Aspects of an overall bill in which other pieces of that bill encourage breaking the rule of law, which is something else that many Albertans, especially newcomers to this country, are fearful of. That is not something that Albertans want to see. We want to see that rule of law upheld. We are going to fight. That doesn't mean sitting back and taking a backseat to Justin Trudeau. We absolutely need to continue to take steps, and I would argue Albertans, yes, I understand, they want us to see that action happen faster, and we should do that faster, looking into tax points and credits, and also I would say pushing forward on an Alberta pension plan. But we also have to put that to Albertans to make the case, and it is a good one, where we have high average incomes, a young population, we have low unemployment rates. That absolutely makes sense. Let's move. Let's move fast.
Section 95 of the Constitution gives us the first right to make rules regarding agriculture and the federal government from time to time. So I just wonder with Rebecca, if the federal government comes through with a 30% mandate to reduce fertilizer use among our farmers, are we just going to say, oh golly gee, I wish you wouldn't do that? I'll tell you what I'd say. I'd say no, it violates Section 95 of our Constitution, which is our right, and we will not enforce that. We will make sure that our farmers have a steady supply of fertilizer so that we can feed the world, because food security is another issue that we're dealing with right now. I'm not going to sit and wait for Ottawa to create economic corridors for us. We're going to start building those so that we can get our products
to market. And that is something that, I would actually absolutely agree with Danielle Smith on. And we see other provinces already fighting that fertilizer cap. That's an area where absolutely that makes sense. That is an area of provincial jurisdiction. That's a fight we can have, but we should be careful before making promises in other areas that we can't keep.
All right. Thank you very much for the open debate. All right. Okay. Mr. Lowen, we'll come to you. Miss it here. You have 45 seconds. You first, then Mr. Taves, then I'll come to you, Mr. Lowen.
Thank you so much. Albertans are leaders, and I'm Alberta's #1 fan. And if we want a legacy of rallying people up, we can certainly do that, or we can work collaboratively. And I just wanted to say to Ms. Smith, you've mentioned several sections out of the Constitution that you think that we can forward our agenda on, which I completely agree with, but then that would render your Sovereignty Act completely redundant. So I think we need to remove this action from all of the work that we're doing and actually work within the Constitution of what we have available to us. There's absolute ability to connect, negotiate, learn, and find wins, massive wins. Rebecca has found one. We've also worked on one with water, with respect to water infrastructure in Alberta, an $831 million infrastructure build in Alberta that we did in collaboration with the federal government.
All right, thank you. Mr. Taves, 45 seconds, over to you.
All right, here's the reality. It would be great to just wish away all our problems with this thing called the Sovereignty Act. We're delusional if we think that's going to happen. It simply will not. And this is my observation over the last few years. I tend to like to work collaboratively, but I've concluded with this federal government, we can't negotiate with them. We won't win if we just simply negotiate but we'll win if we're strategic. My approach with Ottawa is to be assertive and strategic, because strategic we win, and I want to win for Albertans. You know, the tired old approach, a lot of political rhetoric, over-promising and under-delivering, which is what the Sovereignty Act will do, will not get a win in Alberta's column. We need a strategic, thoughtful approach. That's how we win.
All right. Mr. Lowen, 45 seconds on the federal government.
Yes, thank you. Confederation is broken. We can't have any more strongly worded letters. We need to act. But asking hasn't worked. When we call, nobody answers. We need to start saying no to Ottawa. We have things like a pension plan and Alberta Constitution that we could do right now. Myself, I drove to Ottawa to fight those rules that Ottawa came down on that were hurting Albertans. I drove there to put my money where my mouth is and stand for Albertans and stand for people across this country. The federal government isn't going to stop, but neither am I. I won't stop fighting for Albertans.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Don't make me remind you there's no applause. You all know the rules. All right. We've got Ms. Sani, 45 seconds to you, and then Mr. Jean, I'll come to you.
Thank you, Jeff. So there is nothing about the Sovereignty Act that makes sense. I've consulted with constitutional experts and lawyers, and it is going to be defeated in the courts. But while that is happening, investors who are thinking of coming to Alberta and putting some of their hard-earned capital into this province are going to be swayed. They are not going to come here. They're going to other jurisdictions. So I just want to be very clear about that. Alberta must fight back, absolutely. But we must not be risky and hot-headed. Now, Justin Trudeau relies on confrontation, polarization, wedging, and division. And at least one of my opponents here today thinks we should respond just like Trudeau. I don't think that way. I'm actually focused on solving real-world problems. And when we respond with anger, it feels good in the moment, but it's counterproductive.
I got to cut you off there. All right. I know it's all hard to not finish the sentence. All right. Mr. Jean, over to you. And then Ms. Smith, I'll come to you again.
Thank you. 10 years as a member of Parliament, 10 years as a lawyer. Sovereignty Act can't work, folks. It's fiscal fairy tale. It is not going to work. I agree with my friends here that we have to do something different. And the equalization referendum, that started as a result of my Wild Rose leadership. We brought that in. And I will tell you that step one is acting on the amazing mandate that Albertans gave us in the referendum, 62%. We can force Canada to the constitutional negotiation table. All these sections of the Constitution, well, try section 46. That's where you give legal notice to the rest of the country that you are not happy with the situation because you have received a mandate from the people. Without a mandate from the people, it cannot happen. There is a process involved, and we are on that process. We need a leader that believes in it. That's why I brought it out years ago, because I believe in that focus. We need to do it now.
All right, that's 45 seconds, Mr. Jean. Thank you. Ms. Smith, I saw your paddle up. You wanted to weigh in here at the end. 45 seconds, over to you.
One of the last interviews I did on the air was with a scholar by the name of Germaine Belzile from the Montreal Economic Institute. And I asked him the question, why does Quebec hate us so much? And he said, Quebec doesn't hate you. They just don't think about you at all. They're too busy thinking about themselves. And I think you should think about yourselves for a change. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and it's the reason why I've adopted the Alberta Sovereignty Act, because it puts Ottawa on notice that, yes, it just restates what's in the Constitution and the Charter, but it says we are drawing a hard line. And you know when the last time this action was taken? When the Emergencies Act came through in Quebec. Look what Quebec did. They convened their National Assembly, which as they called it, and they said, we will not enforce that. That is the kind of thing that Quebec has already done. That is the kind of thing we absolutely can do, and the thing that we must do.
All right, that's 45 seconds. All right, hot topic, I suppose. You all have waters below you, by the way, if you need to fill up. Now's a good time while I get into question 5. Is it here? Question 5 is for you. The question is on energy and diversifying our economy. Alberta's future depends on being driven by economics and job creation. The word opportunity is synonymous with Alberta, as our environment is ideal for growth and prosperity. Diversification across the province is happening, but must continue at an accelerated pace. While energy is certainly the backbone of our economy, it should not hold us back from leading in new opportunities for growth in other sectors. How would you, as leader, continue to attract and diversify industry across our province and address the significant talent shortage that many sectors are facing today? And I want specifics, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this amazing opportunity to speak about a sector that is so meaningful to so many of us. The energy sector and diversification is part of our family. It's part of who we are. When you think about those who are drilling, those who are doing the work, the manufacturing, the pipeline builds, all of the work that goes on in this province, whether that's diversification in plastics, there's so many things. I'm going to talk anecdotally a little bit about that in just a moment. But families live right across the streets from where they are drilling. They care about their earth, air, and water. And this is an alignment between the environment and between energy, and the incredible resource stewardship that we have in this province and our ability to actually market that. We have a global responsibility to get our energy not only to Canada, but to the rest of the world. We have burgeoning economic populations all over the world that are seeking cheap energy like we have. We have access to being able to just flip on a switch, to be able to go and turn on a light to heat our homes. Imagine what is possible if we're able to work collectively with governments across Canada to get our energy to these burgeoning economies where middle classes are coming out of the woodwork, and then be able to attract people to our province. Our province has attracted hundreds of thousands of people because of the energy that we bring forward. When we look at the powers of Indigenous growth in this sector, the way that Indigenous peoples are contributing to pipeline structures, to innovation in the energy sector, leading towards emissions and fueling the economy and exponential growth in clean energy. We have such talent and innovation in carbon capture strategies and new resources, geothermal, mine tailing, sailing from depleted resources. The opportunities are endless, but also to be able to encourage those new skills that align with the environment and with our energy, to be able to look at that, exposing that talent. And
all right,
Alberta
that's 2 minutes. I'm going to
lead.
cut you off there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ahir, who would you like to debate on the topic?
I would like to debate Rajan Sani, please.
All right, Ms. Sani, I will read the question again. You'll have a minute and a half. How would you, as leader, continue to attract and diversify industry across our province and address the significant talent shortage that many sectors are facing today? And specifics, please.
Absolutely. Well, I think everybody knows that I love talking about energy, but now I'm going to talk about agriculture. We know that there is a food insecurity issue. Look what's happening in Ukraine. Their level of wheat production has drastically declined, and the situation is very serious. But here in Alberta, we have everything that we need to create agri-food corridors. I talked about national trade corridor funds and trying to get some of that funding to develop highways. Can you imagine if we had a highway from Fort McMurray to Peace River, how much investment that would open up? That's critical infrastructure. I was also at a pea processing plant at the opening of it not too long ago, and that is another idea. We can actually do value add here in our province to supply nutritious foods all across the globe. Now, I'm just looking at the time, so we talked about labor shortages. Labor shortages are a significant issue in every sector of our economy. Whether you're a trucker or you own a small business or you're a restaurant operator, it's very, very difficult to get qualified and skilled staff. So Quebec has more autonomy over their immigration. When we talk about autonomy and independence, these are the kind of ideas that we need to pursue. How can we get more qualified skilled labor through the immigration system into Alberta so we can actually grow our economy? We cannot grow unless we have talent and skilled talent. So there are a number of ideas around this particular file that I'd love to share with you in the future.
All right, I'm going to cut you off there. 4 minutes of open debate. Kick us off, Ms. Ahir.
Thank you so much. Well, skilled labor, this is a perfect example of exactly what needs to happen in Alberta. We are actually probably the biggest barrier to that skilled labor being able to come into our province because of the red tape and not allowing people with professional designations to actually pursue the jobs that they were intended to do. My father's perfect example. In 1962, he came in here as an engineer. And not only did he have to redo all of his education, but apply because the university that he came from was not accepted here in Alberta and in Canada. So if you look at all of those opportunities to be able to make sure that we remove barriers for new talent to be able to come in, we want to attract all of the talent from all over the world and steal that talent into our province. We're a teeny tiny province, 4.3 million people. We need to grow. By 2030, we could be as many as 6 million or 7 million people. We need to make sure that we have our systems in place, not only to attract that talent, but also, Rajan was talking about agriculture. Food security is one piece of it, but think about agriculture from the aspect of energy and what they're producing with respect to that.
All right, jump in here, Ms. Sani.
I would absolutely agree that credentialing is critically important. We all have stories. I have stories of relatives who were very, very qualified and could not find their place in the labor market here in Alberta so that they could actualize their potential. There is tremendous potential. So one of the things that I plan to do as Premier is to speed up the credentialing process. We have a healthcare workers shortage in this province. We've got a shiny new hospital in Grand Prairie that doesn't have doctors, and it's short of nurses. It's a travesty. So credentialing is something that we do need to speed up, and of course, as we talk about labor shortages, there are other sectors that we need to support as well. But I want to go back to the question.
All right, let's see what Ms. Ahir has to say.
Well, I just wanted to add to what Rajan was saying, and I want to give a shout out to Medicine Hat actually right now, because right here in this awesome city, you guys started a hydrogen task force in, I believe it was in 2021. That hydrogen task force has taken light and has grown with the government and the opportunities to see what zero emissions would look like. Every single large company, corporation, energy company is looking at zero emissions right now. It is an environment and energy collective that we do together to show our responsible development. We have to make sure it's not just about Alberta, folks. We have to make sure that places like the UK are not calling us dirty oil, that places like other countries in the world are not looking at us as not even an opportunity to be able to get our products to them. We have to make sure that we're using what we have available to us.
Let's let Ms. Sani.
I appreciate all these comments, wonderful comments, but I just want to get back to the question on diversification. I was talking about agriculture and some of the key messages that I'm hearing from farmers. By the way, we have the most sophisticated and smartest farmers here in Alberta in the world. I'm not from a farming background, but I hear that all the time. Some of the key issues that they're having are around water. Water is an issue for economic growth, and it's certainly an issue for farmers. They have issues around electricity. And they also have issues, as I'd mentioned before, around agri-food corridors. We need to invest in our highways and we need to invest in our road systems so some of that product can actually be delivered to markets.
Rajan, I'd like to speak about water a little bit. One of the biggest issues that we've had is the government not investing enough into water and pivots into areas in order to create arable fields in Alberta in order to have irrigation available. Pivots are a very, very difficult thing to come by right now because of the way that the world is working and the markets are going. However, if we're actually talking about water consumption, when we use pivots in agricultural areas, we actually reduce water consumption by almost 80%.
All right, that ends our 4 minutes of open debate time. Okay, Ms. Smith, I'm going to come to you for 45 seconds.
I'm okay.
You're going to hold off? All right. Anybody else? I just want to say, Mr. Taves and Ms. Ahir, you only have one remaining rebuttal left, so just to remind you. Ms. Schultz, you want to go 45 seconds?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to just touch on a couple of things as well. You know, when we're talking about obviously energy of today, yes, we need to attract and retain the highly skilled workers we have, and I do want to thank all of the energy workers across our province that obviously give us access to safe, reliable energy. We also have to start talking about energy of the future. CO2, hydrogen, we got to keep talking about LNG. This is the energy of the future. This is what will help keep.
Well, it looks like the feed from Medicine Hat, which was good for about an hour, has jammed up again. Looks like we got it back, Sheila.
Yes, we have to speed up credentialing. Yes, we have to take more ownership over our immigration. But the other thing we have to do is cut through some of the bureaucracy. Whether it's talking about nuclear or ag, when I ask people who's leading, oftentimes they say it's not us because our bureaucrats are still working on the org charts and the other provinces are hustling investment.
All right, thank you. All right, that ends question 5. Question 6, we're going to move on here quickly to Mr. Taves. It's for you. The question is on unity and leadership. At regional levels around the globe, conservative movements have faced internal struggles to maintain a thoughtful Big Tent approach. There's no secret that many here on this stage have been early adopters of unity, yet have struggled to bring people together in an effective way. The topic of unity is one of great importance to the membership, as many feel the infighting must stop.
Maybe they bought a temporary internet pass and they exhausted all the gigabytes or something.
In a world of division, intolerance, and lack of understanding, How will you, as leader, unite the party and move our province forward for the benefit of all Albertans? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jeff. I think this is the most important question of the evening because, consistent with my opening comments, unity is mission critical for this movement, because if we're not united, we will not beat Rachel Notley in 2023. And friends, leadership matters when it comes to unity. It's absolutely critical. You know, I've been in the private sector right until 2019. But even when I was the Minister of Finance, I drew on some of my experience that I'd gained in the private sector.
And Sheila, I can't believe how many of these so-called conservatives are talking about
In past leadership roles. You know, whether it was leading our business teams or whether it was during the time that I served as president of the Canadian.
I can confirm that shutdown is on other channels too. I'm looking at other media companies.
Canadian Cattlemen's Association, a time post-BSE when there was significant loss, emotion, and division. I had to hold disparate provincial members together, all wanting to go their own way, all wanting to do their own thing. And had we lost those provincial members, we would have lost the war. You know, it's right now we're in not a dissimilar time in this conservative movement. And that has informed, my previous experience has informed my approach. As a leader, I take a collaborative approach. Every voice around the table matters. You know, when every voice has an opportunity to speak, we make better decisions. That's absolutely essential.
Imagine trying to talk about unity without talking about the fact that he was on the Sky Palace ordering police to arrest Pastor Arthur Pavlovsky SWAT team style.
Imagine talking about healthcare without talking about canceling surgeries that led to all those extra cancer deaths and unexplained and extra deaths. Imagine talking about healthcare and not talking about the impact of their bad COVID reaction and that it had what it did to the healthcare system.
Yeah, from mental health to hundreds of thousands of canceled, quote, elective surgeries,
Suicide.
Cancer screenings. You know, there's an out-of-touchness here, but one of the weirdest things is how slavish they are to the Trudeau's narrative of net zero. And we can impress, was that Leela here who was saying we have to impress the United Kingdom with how, what, United Kingdom, we don't actually export any oil and gas to the United Kingdom.
It's the other way around. We actually buy oil, North Sea oil from the UK because we don't have a east-west pipeline in this country. So we don't have to impress them. They don't care about us.
You know, Joe Biden is going to Saudi Arabia begging the prince for more oil. He's sending emissaries to Venezuela begging for more oil. Russia, far from being sanctioned for oil, Germany is begging them not to turn off the oil and gas pipelines. And these people think that they're going to impress some fancy pantses somewhere. If people will buy oil from Iran, from Russia, from Vladimir Putin himself, who dominates Gazprom, and these people think you're going to impress some environmental activists, we have to win over Greta Thunberg. It really is
social. That's Trudeau's social license garbage.
Yeah.
We laughed when Trudeau suggested it. Why are these so-called conservatives suggesting it? And why are they in this cult of net zero? The pursuit of net zero just cost Calgary taxpayers $87 billion in a net zero carbon plan. It's crazy. It's stupid. If you care about this stuff, Canada's a carbon sink anyway. What are we doing here? Using the language of the left.
Yeah. We're waiting for the feed from Medicine Hat to come back. Can we hear it, Efron? I know the problems were in Medicine Hat. Here we go.
Organized a unity effort.
No.
It's frozen again. I want to tell our viewers that sometimes when there's an internet problem, once in a while, it actually is on us. But I am checking on other channels right now. It is the official feed from Medicine Hat. Looks like it's an interesting venue, a helicopter hangar, and there's a backstory there to that helicopter. It was canceled by Jason Kenney, but the local MLA fought for it and got it funded. There's a bit of a backstory there. But it's weird because there's no air conditioning. It's 40 degrees in the room. Everyone's sweating. And they do not have a good internet connection. And like we talked about earlier, with $175,000 entry fee from 7 candidates,
you would think
well over $1 million. getting back to the substance of things, it's so weird how obsessed they are with hydrogen. Now, I like hydrogen. It's the first element in the periodic table. We're made of hydrogen. You might see the word in carbohydrates. Hydrogen and carbon and oxygen are just in about everything. But to pretend that hydrogen is a fuel that will displace or supplant natural gas or oil is a weird leftist idea. It's just a pretend, or we really do value chemicals and industry, just not the ones that anyone uses. Why are you talking about hydrogen? And the question, how can we diversify away? Alberta has more oil in Alberta than any other country in the world other than Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. You have 300 years worth of production of oil, ethical oil, and they're saying, oh, we got to diversify away from that? Would Hawaii diversify away from tourism because there's too much tourism there? It's absurd. Would Hong Kong diversify away from finance? We need more industry besides finance. What kind of kooks, other than self-hating Trudeau copycats, would say we have to diversify away from energy? You're the energy capital of the world, but you want to get away from that for some reason.
We just diversified away from coal starting in 2015, and it is leveling coal communities, and it has tripled our electricity bill. And frankly, we didn't diversify away from coal jobs or coal. We diversified away from Alberta coal jobs,
right?
Because when we need production, we have to buy coal-fired electricity from Montana and Saskatchewan, where they haven't bought into this madness quite yet. So we diversified away from coal, and I would describe us as the Saudi Arabia of coal. We have 800 years of some of the cleanest burning coal on the face of the earth under our feet. And they said, you know what? Let's just move away from it. Yeah. And here we are. And they want to do the same thing to the oil and gas industry, and it will be even more catastrophic.
You know, if anyone knows the lovely seaside town of White Rock, it's really a suburb of Vancouver. It's just gorgeous. There's a gorgeous beach there, famous fish and chips and ice cream. And every hour or less, a huge train comes up White Rock. It dominates the moment. And it's a train... I just forgot the name of the company. It's Warren Buffett's railway line. It's BNSF, I think, is the... and it's a coal train. It's a train bringing American coal up the West Coast, past White Rock, to the largest coal port in North America, which is just southwest of Vancouver. We bring American coal up, Burlington National Santa Fe. That's what it is.
Yep.
Bring it up on Warren Buffett's trains to ship onto cargo ships in Vancouver to go to China. No Canadian coal, but lots of Warren Buffett's coal brought up by train to Vancouver to be exported. So there's a ton of coal going through Canada. It's just American coal. And they want to get away from oil. And hey, UK, look, we're using hydrogen. Using hydrogen for what, sister? Using hydrogen to drive a car, to fly a plane, to heat a home? What are you, a kook? The last time I've heard hydrogen being used was in the Hindenburg. That didn't end very well. I'm not saying one day in the future that some fantasy fuel won't work, but it's not working now. By the way, I just want to remind our viewers that the feed is cut in Medicine Hat, not here. I have on my screen here, I'm monitoring other media networks, and they have a blackout too. And again, shame on the party for that. But I have to say, I was tuning in because I did not know a lot about the candidates tonight. So I know some of them. I've known Danielle Smith since we were in university together. I've known Brian Jean since he was an MP before he became leader of the Wild Rose. I know a little bit about Travis Taves and the Sky Palace and his role as the guy who had the $4 billion question mark in the last audit. I didn't know a lot about Rajan Sawhney, about Rebecca Schultz. I didn't really know a lot about Todd Lowen. I knew a bit about Leela here. But I have to say I'm underwhelmed by every single person on that stage.
Every single one. I was expecting more from Brian Jean. I was wondering where he went for half the time.
He had sort of a snooze there. We just didn't see him for about half an hour straight. Yeah. Danielle Smith reminds me that she really... she can read a good message track. She can go through the talking points on certain things quite well. but then she just surprises you with some quirky, kooky stuff like that vodka and hydrogen and net zero and all these.
You know what I like my vodka from? Grain. Grain, and that's grown by Canadian farmers who need fertilizer, and that was the only thing that she said that I was like, okay, great. That's an issue that Albertans actually care about when she's talking about nitrogen caps. Yeah. And that was the only time I thought where that was like, perfect. That's an issue that everybody cares about right now. That's a fight we need to pick with the federal government. But did you notice that all of them are saying, we can't fight with the federal government. Yeah. We can't put an or what behind our threats to the federal government, which is what the Sovereignty Act is. It's an or what for once instead of a strong.
Or there'll be risk. Or there'll be risk. Risk of what? That they might cancel a pipeline. You know, Travis Taves is a Jason Kenney mini-me, but without the credentials. Todd Loewen underwhelmed. You know, I was hoping for something a little more. I mean, when he had a chance to take it to Travis Taves, he made a point, and then he just sort of. Oh, it looks like we got the feedback. Yeah. Let's go back to the feed.
To represent the diverse voices of Albertans are the main decision makers in government. We can't do things the same way we've done them. Not in the last 3 years, where some voices are heard louder than others, and there's different sets of rules for different people. I made that commitment to my caucus colleagues of how we're going to do things different and what they can expect in me as part of this amazing team.
All right, thank you. Mr. Loewen.
Thank you. There's no question that unity is vital for success, but we need to rebuild the trust of Albertans and the members of the party. Now, I said what was true when there was a price for saying it, and those in cabinet said nothing. Mr. Taves, you said you unequivocally supported the Premier, and I never once heard you in caucus speaking against the Premier or any of the actions that were happening in government. Jason Kenney's record is your record. I stood up, I did what everybody seems to call the tough thing. So I am that leader, because my loyalty is to the constituents that I represent and to Albertans.
All right, Jeff. Well, thank you. Oh, great. Mr. Taves, you have one more. So this is your last one.
No, I was called out on that one.
All right. Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds.
All right. I just simply need to respond to Todd's assertion there, because here was where I spoke out. I was around that cabinet table, and that's where I spoke out. I represented the views of my constituents, rural Alberta, and I represented the views of Todd's constituents while I was there around the table, making a difference instead of standing on the outside sniping. Again, real leadership is not cutting and running. Real leadership is serving under the burden of leadership at a time when there's much pressure and bringing the views of constituents forward to ensure they were heard. That's what I did, and I'm proud of delivering that kind of a voice to my constituents.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our last question of the night. And so as far as 45-second paddles go, Mr. Taves, you have one, Ms. Smith, you have one, Ms. Sani, you have one, and Mr. Jean, you have one. All right, the rest of you have used up all your time. So hopefully you get called out. All right, the question for you, Mr. Jean, is on provincial surplus. Many Albertans are tired of expensive bureaucratic roadblocks that prevent things from getting done efficiently. Value for money means creating returns we can all benefit from. With record surpluses on the horizon driven by high commodity prices and a growing economy, coupled with an increased cost of living, many feel a reduction in taxes is appropriate at this time. Others believe that a significant reinvestment into the Heritage Savings Fund, or our rainy day fund, is more appropriate. Specifically, how do you, as leader, plan to balance savings versus investing in order to maintain long-term value and sustainability for Albertans while meeting the demands of a growing population? You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. This isn't complicated. In an age of increasing interest rates, you have to use the surpluses to pay down debt as it becomes due. The last thing we should do is roll over any old debt to new higher interest rates, because we've seen what's going on, and we know ultimately, if we've lived through the 80s as I did, what can happen if you have high interest rates. You have a lot of people that are very uncomfortable, and many people going bankrupt. The good news is that our debt will be coming due slowly, just over the next decade. And our financial circumstances have changed because so many royalty-paying oil projects are actually at full payout. About 80% of all oil sands projects are now paying full royalties. That's great news. That means we have the largest surpluses we will probably ever see. We should save those surpluses, pay down debt as it becomes due. In the meantime, we should use the income from those surpluses to actually reduce the cost of transmission and distribution charges to families in Alberta. I'm telling you this, I'm not going to reduce taxes on businesses, that's for sure. In the long run, as we retire more and more debt, we should look at using the surpluses to pay for other things. That will reduce Albertans' costs. The day-to-day costs for consumers, the day-to-day costs for you, because that's what we need to do right now. We don't need new government projects. We need to run and manage government better. We need to be a boring government that you forget is there because they're not in your way. They get out of your way and remove the obstacles from your way. We have to avoid the old trap of making our government so expensive in good times that we can't afford it in bad times. I've seen it in Fort McMurray. And folks, we're very poor in infrastructure right across the province, and especially there. We need to do whatever we can do in order to make sure that we take those surpluses, pay off debt, and support people that can't afford to live right now because of inflation. Private sector economists have actually suggested that our surpluses could be $15 billion a year for the next 3, 4, 5 years. According to the government website, we have almost $5 billion in bonds coming due this year, about $3 billion next year, and the year after that, more than $50 billion of our bonds are not due until 2030. So we can use that to support
All right, Mr. Jean, I got to cut you off there. But I will ask you who you'd like to debate on this topic.
Mr. Taves.
All right, Mr. Taves, minute and a half, over to you.
All right, good. Thanks, Jeff. Certainly my thoughts around the surplus, I'm going to predicate my comments with this. When I presented Budget 2022, I was clear with Albertans. Any surplus up to the earnings level in the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, I would categorically reinvest in that Heritage Savings Trust Fund. The first thing we'll do is stop robbing that trust fund from future generations. But you know, as we take a look beyond there, I do agree that we need to pay attention to our debt. We have $93 billion in taxpayer-supported debt in this province, and it will be coming due over the next number of years. Here's what we need to do with surpluses. Ensure we're setting cash aside to pay that debt off as it matures, because if we don't, we could well have to go into capital markets with a cost of capital perhaps double than what the cost is for the debt that's been currently placed. That would double our debt service costs. We're projecting about $2.6 billion in debt service costs right now in this budget. If we double those, that's $5 billion. That comes right out of program spending or would require a tax increase. Friends, fiscal discipline will remain important. We can't make irresponsible decisions during the good years that will put us in trouble during the poor years. Again, reinvest any surplus up to the earnings of the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. In that trust fund, set cash aside to pay down debt as it matures.
All right, well, thank you. Okay, that opens 4 minutes of debate. Mr. Jean, kick us off.
Well, I want to point out and highlight Mr. Taves and our policy. It's very similar. That's why I believe that Mr. Taves would be a great finance minister in a Brian Jean-led government. I do, folks. He's had 3 years of experience. He's been a good finance minister, and I think we can make him great if we work together as a team. But Tavis, I really want to know, isn't it true that government spending increased a lot since 2019? We've seen that. We know that's happened, but I'd like you to explain to Albertans exactly what took place, and that the wage settlements that you gave to our public sector unions, of course, after you started negotiating, sometime after you started negotiating, were actually larger than the ones the NDP gave them from 2015 to 2018. And that does bother me, and I think that we have to look at that because, folks, with inflation now, we're going to be able to catch up. But the truth is we have to make the decisions at the time based on the history and where we are at that time. And frankly, I don't think we can look at catering to the unions every time they come to the door and start knocking. And in fact, they're going to start knocking a lot.
I'd like to respond to that.
Please.
Because further to the question, what did we do in terms of spending? Now, one direction that I gave my department when we started dealing with all the additional pressures of COVID the last 2 years, knowing that our healthcare costs were going to go up specifically because of a lot of personal protective equipment and other healthcare policies. I asked my department to break out those expenditures. In other words, don't include them in our regular operating expenditures for 2 reasons. Number one, we can't know the progress we're making or not. Number two, I was concerned that department heads would want to build that extra spending into baseline budgets. So our basic operating expenditures, the cost to deliver government services, we actually kept flat for the first 3 years. And that was no small feat because we inherited an upward trajectory of 4% per year. Friends, If we would have continued with the spending trajectory we inherited from the NDP and the previous PC government, we wouldn't have been projecting a $500 million surplus in this fiscal year. It would be a $6 billion deficit.
Isn't
Fiscal discipline
isn't that
matters.
a great way to see a team working together, folks? This is a team up here. We're all friends, or want to be friends, and we soon will be, because most of us will be working together, and hopefully we'll get somebody elected, and then we'll be able to go back and take over the province, because this can't happen unless we work together. It can't happen unless we have great ideas, and that's why all these people are up here today, to give great ideas. But they do need a leader, folks. And they need a leader that has experience dealing with Ottawa, a leader that has experience dealing with the Constitution and courts, a leader that has been a leader before, and that is me.
I would like to just make a couple of comments on the public sector, because those were, we need to talk about the public sector. Shortly after I was tapped to be Minister of Finance, and it's certainly been a privilege to serve Albertans as their Minister of Finance over the last 3 years. I found out what I believe to be true, and that was we had a bloated public sector. We had a bloated public service. And so I worked with other ministers, other ministries at the time, and we thoughtfully, carefully, and I would suggest compassionately, reduced the size of the public service, friends, by 8% in the last 2 years. We've gone a long ways to right-sizing government, right-sizing the public service. And yes, we did get a collective bargaining agreement with virtually all of our public sector partners. And here were the objectives that I had. Number one, we had fiscal objectives to ensure that Alberta was not an outlier in remuneration relative to other provinces.
I actually want to hear that, but I just want to say that, running out of time, folks, and I do want to hear that. We'll have a conversation afterwards, because I do want to hear that. That's innovative. But the truth is, what we need to do is we need to open up the Constitution, folks. We do. And I know you see that as a site out there that can't be attained. It can be. The Constitution, the Supreme Court of Canada has laid it out. And without that, we're not going to be able to deal with our issues of money and fiscal balance or healthcare.
I have to say, our collective bargaining agreements met our fiscal objectives.
Okay, we're done, folks. Just a quick side. So that was a great debate. Unfortunately, the screen dropped on us twice on the digital feed. However, I have been told we have a clean copy of this recording, and that will be posted to the website. So everybody else across the province, if you missed it, we apologize. I'm not in charge of the technology, I'm sorry. But we will have a clean recording, so you will be able to get that. In terms of 45-second rebuttals, I have Ms. Sawney, Ms. Smith. Anybody else? Mr. Lowen? Okay, Ms. Smith, Mr. Lowen. All right. And Mr. Taves, you still have one rebuttal you can use in this somewhere. And Mr. Jean, you actually have two, but you can't use them back to back.
That's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Sawney.
Thank you, Jeff. And folks, I fear for where our country is headed, which is why we need serious and stable leadership, not risky and hot-headed ideas. And that's why when it comes to the provincial surplus, I'm an economist, I know how to do forward planning. We must absolutely pay down debt. We must absolutely put some funds into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. And we must strategically invest and target an investment in infrastructure. I had talked about infrastructure earlier, health and education. But I had also mentioned that when governments can help, they should. There are many people in this province who are hurting, who cannot make their grocery bills. And that is why I had talked about indexing seniors benefits, AISH benefits, and income tax brackets.
All right. Ms. Smith, you have 45 seconds.
Some of my friends on the stage here have been digging up old columns. I wish they'd dug up the column from 2001 when I wrote about how we could grow our sovereign wealth fund to a significant level. When I look at why I'm a conservative, I look back on the history with Peter Lougheed setting aside 30% of our resource revenues, and then when Klein took over, how he made us debt-free. That's part of my conservative identity. And then, of course, with Premier Stelmach, when he came in and did a major investment in infrastructure. Those are the three things that I think are the most important for us to do right now. I would like to see us set aside a dedicated portion every single year so we can grow that Alberta Sovereign Wealth Fund to a significant level where we can start reducing taxes. We just have to get started now, and I think that that is a policy that I look forward to discussing.
Let's move on to Mr. Lowen. Mr. Lowen, you have 45 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Government is very bad at predicting cyclical cycles when it comes to booms and busts. As a result, we see overspending when times are good, and we see debt when times are bad. And I believe the government needs to develop a legislated plan for how to handle surpluses, and I believe that should be paying down debt. We have enormous debt in Alberta. We have a huge interest rates, interest that is costing taxpayers billions of dollars each year, and that needs to be spent on the services for Albertans instead of banks and bondholders. So obviously we could be doing more by reducing income tax for average Albertans and raise the basic personal exemption so that'll affect all Albertans' income.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lowen. Okay, Mr. Jean, 45 seconds, then I'll come to you, Mr. Taves.
There's two people on the stage that still haven't talked about PST and why they thought about putting it in and why they talked about putting it in. And more than that, I'm interested about why they changed their mind, because tax does have a lot to do with people's ability to pay things. And having a consumer tax means that a lot of people are going to have their costs increased. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about what people do want. They don't want tax credits that you might get back after you spent the money a year later. They don't want tax credits that are $1,000 and may give you $300. They don't want that. What they want is they want their costs lowered on a daily basis. They want to see their gas less expensive. That's why I've suggested a permanent reduction of 30 cents a litre at the gas prices today. That's why I've suggested a third off their transmission and distribution charges.
All right. That's
those things help people on a day-to-day basis.
There, and we're going to go to Mr. Taves.
All right, there's only one person again on this stage that I'm aware of that has talked about implementing a PST and raising taxes on Albertans by $5 billion as recently as about 20 months ago. And that's my leadership colleague, hopeful colleague here, Ms. Danielle Smith. I have never suggested a PST. In fact, again, if you want to see what I would do fiscally and economically as Premier, look at what I've done as the Minister of Finance. I lowered taxes, which resulted in expanded fiscal capacity and expanded government revenues. We brought fiscal discipline to government spending. That combination gave me the privilege of presenting the first balanced budget in over a decade. Gone are the days when we robbed from our children.
All right. Ms. Smith, you were called out there. I'm going to give you 45 seconds.
I thought I answered this because the context that I wrote the column, and that's kind of what you do when you're in the media, is that you write columns on topical issues and try to find solutions. It was when we had a $24 billion deficit. Now, I guess there's only two options. Either the stories are untrue, where it was saying that Travis Taves was floating the idea of a provincial sales tax, or he was just going to wait, I guess, until oil and gas revenues bailed us out. And that's kind of what's happened. We now have $16 billion worth of resource revenue, spending almost all of it. We got to do a better job stewarding that for the future.
All right. Okay. Mr. Jean, you have one last paddle. Who keeps doing that?
One last paddle. Well, I'm very interested in what takes 42% of our tax dollars and 42% of everyone's tax dollars, and that's healthcare. We need to spend a little bit better on that and get better investments. It's not about the money, it's about the outcomes. It's about making sure that people receive not just less expensive goods as they travel, and that's why I reduce gas, because that reduces groceries, it reduces appliances, it reduces everything that we get pretty much in Alberta. We need leadership to drive change. We need better management, better executive decisions, better decisions. Leadership is not about great talkers, it's about making good decisions and having a track record of good decisions, or having bad decisions as a track record. I need to hear from Danielle Smith to commit today that you won't give bad medical advice or cancer advice again, because you hurt a lot of people with what you said, and you still said it was a misunderstanding. You haven't taken it back. Misunderstanding is not what it is.
45 seconds is over. 45 seconds is over, and we've been over this topic. All right. We're going to end a little bit late anyway, so we're not going to get back into it, and maybe that's something for a closing statement. Ms. Smith, I don't want to get back into it because Mr. Taves was called out, you were called out.
No, I don't want to get back into it. I just want to tell Brian.
Let's move on. You can deal with it in your closing statement.
No, I just want to tell Brian I'm sorry for the loss of his son. And
all
I've
right,
heard
Ms.
the story.
Smith, I'm going to stop you.
I've heard the story, and it's heart-wrenching, and I know exactly how he feels because my family member.
I think we all understand, and you can address that in your closing statements, which I'm now going to give everybody 2 minutes to do because we do have a little bit of extra time. All right, this has been drawn at random, and that's how we're going to close tonight. And Ms. Schultz, you will kick us off with 2 minutes. Please go ahead with your closing.
Thank you. 9 months from right now, the question Albertans will be asking themselves is, who do we trust? Who do we trust to drive our economic growth? Who do we trust to transform healthcare and education? Who do we trust, based on their record, to take on Justin Trudeau? So as a party, who do we trust to ensure the NDP never sees government again? Trust is built over time. A few candidates on this stage, they have records of their own. We absolutely cannot go backwards or stick to the status quo. We need a leader not just for the next year to get us through the next election. We need a leader who can take us into the next generation of our conservative movement by bringing Albertans along with a vision of the future. A vision for jobs and economy, yes, not leaving our children, my children, yours, with debt so that they can't meet the demands of their time because they're paying off the choices made in ours. We know that, but we also need a vision of hope and optimism and opportunity and a plan for our future. I will lead a party that you, Albertans, party members, can be proud to vote for. So I ask again, in May 2023, who do you want to see running against Rachel Notley and the NDP? I am asking you for your vote as I run to be the leader of the United Conservative Party, a party and a team that I am proud of and proud to run alongside, and as I ask for your support to be the next Premier of this amazing province of Alberta.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. All right, Ms. Ahir, sorry. You have 2 minutes.
You're right. We do need to build trust. That is the work that is being done right now, to get in front of you, to engage with you, to give you something that you deserve, a government that is accountable and honorable, not something that you should ask for. It is positive and empowering campaign that is going to build a government that you can be so proud of. And I'm very proud to stand with my colleagues here on the stage. But I want you to understand that this is not about me. This is truly about Albertans, and we cannot use ideology or personal agenda to get there. Those who just arrived yesterday, to homesteaders, First Nations, no matter who you love or who you pray to. This province is welcoming and amazing, and we have to grow our population. We are looking for governments that will have a strong team, empathy, and insistence on customer service, education, and healthcare, and working constructively on all levels of government to show a capacity to learn and to grow. And we will listen, and we will collaborate, and we will lead with humanity, and we will look at a shift in the culture that will actually bring us forward. So it's not just about winning in 2023. You win in 2023. We lead together. Leadership is not about being at the top. It is this collective wave of energy and strength and all of the people that build this amazing province, this tapestry of culture. It's not about division, it's about building. If we benchmark our budgets against population growth and inflation in the last balanced budget, and each year use that guidance to inform our spending, we get off that tax and spend roller coaster. We have stable budgeting, long-term planning, and it enables savings of our resources. And we grow the Heritage Fund, and we protect our services, and we reduce inflation, and we maintain low taxation, and pay down the debt prudently. This is the plan that will bring us forward, and I would be honored to be your leader. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ahir. All right, Ms. Sani, over to you. 2 minutes for closing.
Thank you. I have a question for all of you. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we get up in the morning and go to work or make decisions about how to spend our days? We do it for our children, our families, and our communities. And that is why I got into politics in the first place, for my children and family, and for your children and families. And folks, I have already mentioned several times today that Canada is going down a dangerous path, led by destructive policies from the Trudeau Liberals. We can respond impulsively with anger. That would feel good, but it is risky. I have experienced the economic turmoil caused by unstable and unpredictable government. I talked about that today as well. The answer isn't to threaten sovereignty or separation. And I'm going to say something right now, and I want everyone to listen closely. A Danielle Smith victory today means a Rachel Notley victory tomorrow. There is a better way. Our UCP team
All right, let's keep it down, audience. This is closing.
And resilience in Alberta. I've lived and worked in Alberta all my life, and I know the energy industry, and I know how to lead a team. We do have a choice. One choice is to roll the dice on risky and hot-headed ideas. But if we lose that gamble, the losers are Albertans. It's all of us. So in closing, what I would say to all Albertans who are listening right now on the live feed is please do make sure that you go out and purchase a membership. This election is consequential. It will determine the course that our province goes in for at least a decade. Don't be complacent. Don't be forgetful. Please do pick up your membership. And I would say please do visit my website, voterogen.ca, to learn more about me. And don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to talk to you anytime,
All right, thank you, Ms. Sani.
anyplace.
Mr. Jean, over to you. 2 minutes to close.
Thank you for listening tonight. I agree with Rajan. I do have a 3.5-year-old and a 38-year-old, and I'm doing this for my kids just like I'm doing it for your kids, and all of us are here. There are many good people on the stage. In fact, I would say great people, and there's many good people who want to lead our party and be part of our party, and we should be pleased with that. But I'm the only person right now that is talking about renewing the party and returning it to what it was meant to be, a party that represents the vast majority of Albertans. You, who want a conservative government that respects their autonomy in a realistic way. I want this party to make Albertans happier. That involves changing the way we treat each other and other Albertans. It means civility. It also means that we have to be honest when we make mistakes and apologize. I want this party to make Albertans healthier. That means working with our wonderful doctors and nurses and technologists to reform our healthcare system and make it the best in the world. I want to make Albertans freer. That means correcting the mistakes of the last 2 years and making sure that our rights are actually protected. And I want to make Albertans prosperous. That means fighting the Trudeau Liberals, fixing the Constitution, which we can do, it is reality, growing and diversifying our economy, and taking advantage of the can-do spirit of Albertans. If we do these things, we can and will renew our party and win the next election. If you believe in these things, if you want a better hope for the future for your children, for your grandchildren, then please consider voting for Brian Jean. I will prepare, I will have an excellent team around me and surrounding me, and I will listen. I will make sure that I always do what's best for Albertans, what's best for our future. I will make us the happiest, the healthiest, the most free and most prosperous people on the planet. Please go to brianjean.ca, buy a membership, support any one of these candidates, but get involved. Please. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jean. Ms. Smith, over to you. You have 2 minutes for your closing.
I just want to say that even though I think I should be leader, I must say I agree with Brian that every person on this stage has had an amazing input on cabinet decisions, and I think that every one of them is cabinet material. Todd, of course, has done amazing work standing up for the rights of individual MLAs. Rajan has done terrific work on transportation corridors. Rebecca has always got the interests of families at front and center with her activity tax credit. I think that's a great idea. We've got Leela, who I think has got some wonderful ideas she put on the table tonight about immigration. Travis has done terrific work on insurance. I mean, our energy industry now has the ability to self-insure, which is going to be hugely important in this world of disinvestment. And Brian Jean, I'm surprised he didn't talk about his gasoline and diesel proposal tonight to remove the royalties, because I think it's a pretty darn good idea as well. But I think we have to also be honest about why it is we're here this evening. We're here this evening because conservatives win elections when they talk and act like conservatives rather than a bunch of watered-down liberals. Did you stop to think about why it is we're even here tonight? Why we're having this debate? Why we had a leadership opening? It's because the Premier and his team lost the confidence of members and of most MLAs. It's because our members saw a government that wasn't effective in dealing with Trudeau's attacks on our province, complaining, sending letters with no results. That, to me, is the central issue of this campaign, is who is going to stand up to Ottawa. I found it really interesting in a caucus communications that came out July 18th. This is UCP caucus. It says Alberta's government will not accept any plan from the federal government that seeks to interfere in our constitutionally protected ability to develop our resources. That's what MLAs are told to say. That kind of sounds like the Sovereignty Act. So I think what you're seeing here is just a little bit of posturing tonight, because I know that I'm going to fight for you. We're going to stand up to Ottawa. Go to daniellesmith.ca, buy a membership to put Alberta first.
Appreciate it, Ms. Smith. Thank you. Mr. Taves, 2 minutes over to you for closing remarks.
All right. It's really been a pleasure to join all of my leadership colleagues here on the stage tonight. Look, you know, prior to 2019, I was in the private sector my whole life. And I have to say that during those years, I was a typical conservative-minded Albertan. My best day was the day I didn't notice government. I didn't notice government in my businesses, and certainly didn't notice government between me and my family. But it was when our province took a sharp left turn in 2015, and we elected in Alberta an NDP government. That's when I sat up and took note, because I was afraid, I was concerned that the opportunities and prosperity, the freedoms that we'd enjoyed may not be there for our children and grandchildren. And friends, again, I want to draw us to really the question, the pertinent question in this leadership race, and who is that leader that can bring us to victory in 2023? Because friends, that's why I got into politics in 2019, and it's because of that question I joined this leadership race only a few weeks ago. It's also about having real solutions to the challenges we face. We face real challenges around inflation and affordability. It's about having real solutions when we deal with a government in Ottawa who consistently attacks Alberta's vital economic interests. And friends, I am not about political bluster and rhetoric, over-promising and under-delivering. I'm about winning, and we win when we're strategic. But it's also about continuing to position this province for economic growth, diversification. And friends, we're seeing that growth and diversification right now at record rates across sectors. We cannot see the gains we've made eroded. Right now, we need strong, principled, proven leadership. I would ask for your support so we can win in 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Taves. All right, Mr. Lowen, you have the final 2 minutes for closing. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's been a great debate. I've enjoyed learning all sorts of ideas that have been expressed so far. And I want to give thanks, of course, to the organizers of this event. We know it takes a lot to put on a big event like this. And but what I want to do is I want to just look back at some of the comments made here. I think every single person at this table talked about restoring trust and unity, but no one seemed to talk about how it was lost. And I think that's important to think about. Losing trust doesn't just happen. It comes from broken promises. Now, some think that unity is kicking people out and then calling them representing their constituents sniping, but that's not true. We're here today because members spoke. Members wanted a change, and that's why we're here today. My campaign is focused on trust, transparency, and accountability. And I believe leading is serving. So this is your Alberta, and I'm committed to doing it your way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen. All right, the candidate's closing remarks ends the official debate. It has been my privilege to be your moderator for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the candidates a round of applause. All right, on behalf of all UCP party members, I want to thank all the candidates for being here tonight. I do know it's a lot of stress getting here, and I want to thank all of you. I also want to thank the party, specifically our party president, Cynthia Moore, and the entire UCP party team who helped put tonight on and make it possible. And a huge thanks to the people of Medicine Hat for hosting us here tonight. If you don't yet have your party membership to vote on October 6th, visit www.unitedconservatives.ca for more information. And as mentioned in my introductory remarks, the Medicine Hat debate is the first of 2 official debates. Please tune in to the next one in Edmonton on August 30th at the Citadel Theatre. Thank you, and good night, Alberta.
Well, there you have it, Sheila.
Bored. I'm bored. Very, very bored. I don't know if it was because the feed kept cutting out, but there was no momentum there. And usually, sometimes I find the things that they say that ultimately are outrageous, I find that even interesting or something to hold my attention. But there was even very little of that. I'm struggling to write notes about crazy things because it was just so boring. Like Brian Jean said at one point that he's don't think that I'm going to cut taxes on business. Well, who the hell does he think owns all those businesses except normal people? Most of the businesses in Alberta are small businesses. They make up 30% of the economy. It's a conservative viewpoint to cut taxes, but that was like the only interesting thing in the last half there was he said something that Rachel Notley would have said.
Yeah, and remember, this is the party that has presided over the last 2 disastrous years. And it's like that didn't happen. No mention of why Kenny lost. No mention.
Danielle Smith touched on it a little bit
Yeah.
in her closing remarks.
Yeah.
But the whole debate should have been about why they are here today.
Yeah.
And, you know.
You know
but
what?
it wasn't.
The word. I mean, there's 7 of them, and it popped into my head: Jason Kenney and the 7 Dwarves. Some of them have no chance. I mean, Rajan Sani, Leela here, Rebecca Schultz. I just don't think they have a chance. Brian Jean, I thought would be a lot stronger. He was silent for there was a half an hour in a row where was he there? Travis Taves was the closest thing to a professional politician. He speaks slickly. When he was asked tough questions, he squished away like a wet watermelon seed when he try and pin it down and squitch that way and squitch that way. When he was asked about the missing $4 billion. He talks the most like a politician, and I think there's a comfort level to people who says, oh, that's a slick politician. He didn't really say anything, but I find that familiar, that kind of slickness. Yeah. He's obviously the carrier of the Jason Kenney torch. It's a bit of a joke for him to pretend that he was at the cabinet table fighting for freedom. We just didn't know it.
If the cabinet table was the table in Sky Palace.
Yeah, he was at the Sky Palace table. That's what he was doing. I thought I'd see more from Brian Jean. I didn't. I had been told that Todd Loewen was the outsider, was the freedom-oriented dissident. I saw a guy who was not a professional politician, and sometimes you say, oh, I really like that about him. No, there was no oomph there. He lacked charisma, which is fine. You can be anti-charismatic in a way.
Harper was.
I was the next words out of my mouth. But Harper had a clear ideology, a clear understanding of what he believed and what he most certainly didn't. I didn't see that in Todd Loewen. I think this debate really, and I have no idea if this is reflected on the ground, but it felt like Danielle Smith versus Travis Taves. And Danielle Smith is good at talking a good line about freedom things, but then again, she was 7 years ago before she sold out the party. So will that happen again? And I saw something I had forgotten about her. Like I said, I knew her. We went to college at the same time. She can cotton on to quirky, kooky ideas with the same passion that she talks about freedom ideas. So there she is talking about fighting Ottawa, talking about freedom. Oh, I'm getting excited. Look at how strong she is. And then she talks about net zero and carbon vodka and hydrogen. And I think, by the way, her cancer comment was part of that. Someone put an idea in her head, and she said, oh, that sounds good. And she sort of blurts it out with the same energy and commitment that she talked about a very serious thing. And there's a lack of seriousness at the core there. And I think that's why she sold out the party 7 years ago, because someone planted an idea in her mind. And we happen to know now in history that Preston Manning was one of those, let alone Jim Prentice. And it was enough to bamboozle her and fool her, just enough to sell out the party. There's a kookiness there that I forgot about. So you've got the sometimes great, sometimes atrocious Danielle Smith, who it is true. She's just is this a replay now, or we have on the screen?
Yeah,
or
this is a replay. Yep, it's just B-roll.
Oh, it's just B-roll. Okay, I thought maybe there'd be a Q&A, but I understand there is no scrum. No. Okay, otherwise we'd be there. So I think what you have is
she's open-minded to a fault.
Yeah,
I think is how I would describe her.
That's right. That's right. And in Travis Taves, you just have a political reptile who is a Jason Kenney mini-me, admit nothing, never apologize, never explain, just fake it. Oh yeah, I was for freedom, absolutely at the cabinet table. I just didn't like you.
I was sticking up for your constituents.
Todd,
because we threw you out.
Yeah, Todd Loewen, you don't represent your people. I did when I was at the Sky Palace. Don't you know I was there for them? I was helping your constituents when I voted to throw you out of the party. Yeah, don't you understand that? I mean, it's so easy.
Can't you see?
Here's the thing, though. Any one of these 7 dwarves will win the next election, because Jason Kenney was like the liver of a body. It attracted all the toxins, and everyone left and right despised him, and he's gone now, and with it, a lot of the toxicity.
Yeah.
Travis Taves, although he is just as implicated in those things, is not as hated.
Right. He kept his head down. He doesn't have all this stigma that he probably deserves.
Yeah. I think the choice will likely... Now, I have no... See, the thing is, there could be some subterranean membership sales and other things that we don't detect. I mean, remember, Patrick Brown, the disgraced politician from Ontario, he had a surprise win in the PC Party of Ontario leadership race because he was doing all sorts of membership sales that were not detected. So he was thrown out for reasons of corruption or sort of sexual misconduct charges.
There's a lot of things there.
I just don't believe that Rajan Sawhney, Rebecca Schultz, or Todd Lowen have some strong province-wide organization that we don't know about. I just don't think so. I think they're running to fly their flag, and maybe they'll be in cabinet next time. Brian Jean may have that province-wide network. I just don't know. I know he checked out. He was out of things for a bit. He showed surprising strength on the ground when he won his local nomination against Jason Kenney's wishes and organization. So Brian Jean may have some strength, but he didn't show it in the rhetorical field today. So I think you have Brian Jean as a maybe.
He's the mulligan candidate.
Yeah.
He's the mulligan.
That's right. And you've got Smith versus Taves. I think any of those three would beat the NDP.
Yep.
And I regret, and by the way, I remember when I met with Jason Kenney when he was still a federal cabinet minister and he was contemplating going to Alberta to merge the parties. And my first reaction is, you don't need to merge them because that's being sorted out. The Wild Rose is clearly ascendant. The left-wing red Tories in the PC party are on their way out. You don't need to merge them. It's being sorted out. But he went ahead and merged them. And that is a problem because as was the case for 4 decades when the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta was in power the last time, is you don't have a clear ideological agenda. You heard some kooky things today in terms of Alberta being submissive to Trudeau, in terms of we have to meet our climate goals. We have to get social license for Greta Thunberg or UK or whatever. You had some ideas that should be called out, but called out by whom?
Yeah.
I mean, I know there is technically a Wild Rose party, and there technically are a number of small parties, some of which are independence-oriented, et cetera, but they don't have MLAs. These parties don't have MLAs. So it reminds me, when Maxime Bernier and the PPC federally present, I say, I like Maxime Bernier and I like the party, but you don't have a seat. And so the problem with Jason Kenney merging the two parties of the right is they were not parties of the right. You had a party of the right called the Wild Rose, and you had a party of the center or center-left called the PC.
You had a party whose only ideology at the time was power.
That's right.
And I think by joining those parties the way that it happened, while I was in favor of, uniting the right, in retrospect, it did not allow for the organic purge of the rot that needed to happen. Yeah. Because some of those same people are still around, not paying any political consequences for the role they played in any of this mess.
Yeah. And there was a populism and a conservatism in the Wild Rose as opposed to the slickness of the Travis Taves wing. And so I would conclude, I'm really glad I watched this, and I really feel like I got a flavor for what's going on out there. And I should say that there's many things I very much like about Danielle Smith. Because she uses the language of freedom and conservatives. But in the back of my mind, there's this giant asterisk, which is you said all those things before you betrayed them all. And then there's what I'm reminded of tonight is there's a kookiness there, is that she's so open-minded, she's not discriminating, and that she'll pick up with kooky things that, I'm surprised she didn't talk about a monorail. Who talked about someone tonight talked about high-speed rail or something. High-speed, maybe that was Danielle Smith. You're talking about high-speed rail in a province of 4.5 million people? What high-speed rail isn't even economic in places like China, or maybe it's economic in Japan. Anyone who talks about high-speed rail, I think of the Simpsons and the monorail salesman, and I think you have no judgment, you have no discrimination.
Yeah, that's magic beans.
Yeah.
It's just magic beans for a new era. It doesn't make any sense, and there's always some sort of Bombardier type company, and they're just waiting to line their pockets and overbuild and just take advantage of the taxpayer every single time.
If you're using the language net zero, either you believe in it, in which case you believe in junk science and you haven't thought it through because that's going to destroy a province like Alberta that is about energy and agriculture. So either you don't know what you're talking about and you're just blindly mouthing the talking points of Trudeau, the United Nations, and the World Economic Forum, or alternatively, you're just going along with whatever the buzzwords are, hoping that will appease who? Trudeau? The media? I don't know. So
and it moves the battleground on this issue that much closer to you.
Yeah.
You know, when you concede the language to the left like that.
Yeah. And I think half the candidates today are fully bought into the rhetoric and the talking points of the globalist UN climate targets. We have to meet our climate goals and nitrogen and Agenda 2030. So they're all in there. I didn't see an advocate for freedom. I thought it would have been Todd Loewen. I barely saw it. Danielle Smith talked some of the words, but I just have trouble crediting that. And the most slick politician there was the Kenney candidate who, I don't know, I've found it an unimpressive night that avoided the key topics. And I'm reminded that there is no Conservative Party in Alberta. There's a centrist party of ambitious, greasy pole climbers, because Jason Kenney's legacy was to merge the right-wing party with the believe in nothing but winning party, and we can see which wing is ascendant. The professional political operators are ascendant. Now, I got a question for you. If Travis Taves wins, and he might, I don't know what Danielle Smith's strength is on the ground. You know, it wouldn't be the first time a Twitter candidate got crushed by reality. You can be a Twitter candidate and you can be the one with the rhetoric and the sound bites, but are you getting people in Oyen and Stettler and Longview and Three Hills? Are they actually going to vote for you? Now, maybe the Twitter candidate turns, I mean, Donald Trump was a Twitter candidate, but so maybe. So maybe Danielle Smith has a ground game. I don't know. But if Travis Taves is the Kenney candidate and all the Kenney staffers and the Kenney lobbyists think, oh my God, I need to have Travis Taves win, because if it's Danielle Smith or Brian Jean, I'm going to be cut out of power and influence. Like think of all the professional lobbyist class. They're tied to Kenney and Kenney's crew. And all of Kenney's insiders, all of his staff, they want the Kenney team to be replicated. So you're going to see a lot of people come out for Travis Taves as the candidate of Kenney.
Yep.
That could well happen. They got a lot of ink. They got a lot of skin in the game. I was looking forward to seeing something impressive from Todd Loewen. Didn't see it. Brian Jean is a mystery to me. He's a little bit of an odd bird. I like the guy. I like that he stood on the right side of things 7 years ago in the Great Betrayal. I just don't know what his horsepower is on the ground. And he's a little bit of an odd bird too. I don't know. I find this a depressing evening. I think the only saving grace is that any of these candidates will likely defeat Rachel Notley, because none of them are as hated as Jason Kenney is. But as I forget who pointed it out, if Travis Taves gave the public sector union workers a larger raise than even Rachel Notley did, what's the point of electing a bunch of red Tories to do what Rachel Notley did in the name of the PCs? What's the point?
Well, that's how Rachel Notley seemed reasonable to Albertans and not like a threat, is because they had been primed by 4 decades of PC rot and overspending, that Rachel Notley actually didn't seem that far away. And really, in reality, she wasn't from Alison Redford.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm smarter about the Alberta debate. I feel like it's small time. Everything about tonight's debate was small time. The production quality of the debate was small time. The lack of air conditioning, the lack of a good broadcast, the lack of real questions. It was all self-serving questions. There were no fundamental questions. You didn't hear the name Arthur Pavlovsky spoken, at least I didn't hear it.
Churches, nothing.
Yeah, didn't
How do
hear
you
any
how
of
do you
that.
go through church? 3 pastors arrested and taken to jail.
Yeah.
3 pastors
Yeah.
taken to jail for weeks. How does that not get a question in all of this?
Yeah, and that goes to what who selected thousands of questions from around Alberta? Sure.
Yeah, I bet.
And who chose them? And who chose the questions? I say again that it was that lockdownism and the persecution of the church. This is what I said at the very beginning of the show tonight. That is the proximate cause of Jason Kenney's ouster. You know, they say friends come and go, but enemies accumulate. That's true in politics, that you pick up enemies along the way and then they kick you when you're down. Jason Kenney had enemies from a number of battles. But that church battle, a war against Christian churches, I think was the reason he didn't get 70% in his leadership vote, but he got 50%. And if the party is not willing to deal with those issues, then they may lack the ability to have those supporters rejoin the party. If you just have a clone of Kenney who is not willing to grapple and reconcile with the wrongs of the Kenney years, you may have problems. I still believe anyone on this stage could beat Rachel Notley, but it's a disappointing night.
Yeah, I was just reading an iPolitics story about who they have. Their polling shows that of the front-running candidates, Taves, Jean, and Smith is the only one who can make inroads according to their Main Street polling. So take that with a grain of salt. But she appears to be the only one that can make inroads in suburban areas that would defeat the NDP the way the polling is right now. But that could change, although I'm not sure how this debate would change anything, because I'm thoroughly bored. I didn't learn anything new. Yeah. Well, that's not true. I learned that some of them are net zero cultists, which surprised me.
Yeah. And it's true that Jason Kenney won the government in 2019, if I'm remembering my years right. Was it 2019?
Yes.
And so most of the MLAs and the cabinet ministers, they are still green. They're not seasoned. They haven't been MLAs for years or decades. But that said, it was a pretty shallow bench. You know what I mean?
Yep.
To look at those folks and imagine them as premier is hard to do. To imagine them as a cabinet minister in many cases is hard to do. Brian Jean, Danielle Smith, and Travis Taves are the 3 who I could see in that position. I was hoping to see more from Todd Lowen, and I did not have any expectations for the others. Listen, I'm glad they're running. I mean, good for them. The more, the merrier. But I do not believe that this is a truly conservative party. I do not believe that this is a party that has properly reconciled with its disastrous lockdowns and civil rights bonfire of the last 2 years. I do not think this is a party that understands why Jason Kenney was fired. I do not think this is a party that has a real idea of how to fight with Ottawa, other than saying they're going to fight with Ottawa. What does that even mean? I saw
Letters.
I
strongly
saw
worded letters.
Yeah, their press release about the nitrogen thing. We object. Okay, well, that's going to terrify Justin
no, they
Trudeau.
said they didn't. I'm not even sure they said they object. They were disappointed. Like, okay, that's great. I'm sorry that you're sad. Try being a farmer.
Yeah, a strongly worded letter of apology to Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
Jason Kenney had to go. He had to go for moral reasons. He had to go for ideological reasons. He had to go because he would have lost to Rachel Notley.
He would have actually destroyed the party, I think. He would have ripped the stitched together party, he would have ripped it right apart again if he languished any longer.
Yeah, well, maybe that should have happened. Maybe the party should have broken in half, and he could have the professional lobbyist class, and Brian Jean and some others would have revived the Wildrose. But alas, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Well, Sheila, it's been a pleasure to hang out with you these past.
Hey, before we wrap up, we've got a couple of chats that we should get to.
Okay, well, you jump in. Yeah,
I will.
You go ahead
and then we'll
read
sign
them.
off.
I'll look for them here. I know you have them in front of you. I don't have them in front of me. Go ahead.
Efron, you want to bring them up? It's JCMN84. It gives us $10. Thank you very much. And says, vax mandates still BC, BC Transit, liquor employees in healthcare, paramedics and nurses, etc. BC Place Stadium, shoulder to shoulder, no masks while healthcare crumbles. Time to hire back our heroes. Moving right along, we've got Cheryl Dawn V gives us $1. I'm worried Smith's sovereignty for Alberta promises can't be legally achieved. But yet this truly what Albertans want is someone to stand up and fight Ottawa. That's the thing. It's something. Yeah. Nobody else is doing anything. They're just sending letters. And everybody is dunking on her and saying, okay, well, these things can't be legally achieved. What's the harm in trying? Your letters aren't doing anything.
Yeah, so it's struck down by the Supreme Court of Canada. Okay, so how's that not happening? Like, how's that any worse or different? And there has to be an or else, or no one takes you seriously. You know,
right.
Obviously, very few people. In fact, I don't know if anyone on that stage has actually ever run anything or done anything. Travis Taves says he was in the private sector until a few years ago. I suppose I believe him. I don't know his history that well. But one thing that we knew about Donald Trump is the man knew how to negotiate. And the number one rule of negotiating is be prepared to leave the negotiation rather than take a deal, any deal. And Trump was brilliant at that. If you saw him work with North Korea, he was hot and then cold and hot and then cold, and he wouldn't put up with things. Donald Trump, whatever else his flaws were, you know, you're in New York real estate, you know how to negotiate. And none of those people, and well, maybe I should give some exception for Danielle Smith, although I don't think she's actually negotiated anything in her life. She negotiated the disastrous undermining of the Wildrose Party. But other than that, I don't think she's actually negotiated a deal in her life. At least she's proposing to negotiate. None of them know how to negotiate with Ottawa. If you don't have an or else, if you're not prepared to walk away, the other side will laugh at you.
What have we ever gotten out of Ottawa? That's the thing. They keep saying, well, we need to sit down and negotiate with them. What have we ever gotten in all the times that we've done that?
But a negotiation suggests that there's a give and take and that you have something. But if
right,
you're not
instead
prepared,
of just a give.
Quebec twice has shown it does not want to separate. In 2 referendums, they have voted no. But the fact that they talk about it, whether or not it's legal, whether or not it's constitutional, that has enriched that province $100 billion from the West, given it such things as bilingualism across the country, 3 seats set aside on the Supreme Court, powers that the federal government wields in other provinces, they wield it provincially. Simply talking about it, whether or not it's legal or constitutional, has given Quebec tremendous leverage. And so all of those who say, oh, that would be too chaotic. But again, it's not a very conservative party. I like UCP. It's meaningless. It's like ABC or XYZ, the XYZ party. I like that they say UCP. I like that few people spell it out and say United Conservative Party, because it's not a conservative party. It's like, you know, they used to say Kentucky Fried Chicken, now they say KFC, because Kentucky Fried and Chicken, all 3 of those words are politically incorrect now. And so KFC, what does it mean? Oh, I don't know. It's just 3 letters, KFC. It's like BMW. What does BMW stand for? Oh, it doesn't matter. What does UCP stand for? Don't tell anyone. The C used to stand for conservative, but don't say it because they're not really conservative anymore. The United Party is a bit of a joke too. They are a party. I'll give them that.
Well, United, because if you speak out, you get kicked out.
Yeah,
so there's that.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. You want to do it or?
You know what? I can't find it here, so
it's okay. There's only one more.
Okay.
I've got it. Okay. So Cheryl Dawn V also gives us $1 and says, when all the current elected officials go after Danielle Smith, she must be doing something right, but disappointed in her climate change views. hey, Danielle, go check out Friends of Science. They are actually the guests on my show tonight. And we're talking about all this net zero garbage that is going to cost Calgary residents $87 billion in the very near future. But yeah, I mean, they are going after her because she is the front runner. They attacked her on the same thing over and over and over again to the point where it was redundant. And again, I reiterate, boring. But yeah, I was shocked to find out that when she said she had come full circle on her climate change views, wherein she once thought the science was unsettled, which is actually the scientific viewpoint. And she's come around to things being settled. And, oh, by the way, she's pro net zero, which is like right out of the Liberal playbook.
Yeah. You know,
Odd.
I understand why the federal Conservatives use Liberal speak on that, because the CBC and the Ottawa establishment and the other parties all say that. But you would think that in Alberta, a politician would just say, no, it's all BS. I don't have to pretend. Pretending did us no favors. Social license is a fake thing. Ethical oil is superior to conflict oil from Russia and OPEC. And if you say otherwise, then you are a Putin shill. Then you are for the Prince of Saudi Arabia. Alberta doesn't need to apologize to anyone for displacing conflict oil. And if you actually believe any of your Go Ukraine talk, you would let us sell oil and gas to Europe to free Europe from being the hostage to Putin they are. So you don't have to pretend anymore. Social license. Where's your social license for shutting down the oil sands and allowing Russia and OPEC to have free run of the world? Where's your social license for that? So to hear these Alberta alleged conservatives regurgitate those lines is deeply disappointing. If an Alberta conservative, provincially, who doesn't have to talk to the CBC, who doesn't have to talk to the Toronto Star, won't have the courage to say otherwise than the party, then we're doomed. We're doomed. We're just doomed. That's all, Sheila. We're just doomed.
Thanks. Way to end on a high note.
Well, tell me your shirt one more time, what it says. Your microphone's blocking it. I don't need a warning label. There you go. And that's at rebelnewsstore.com. That's part of our pro-farmer. The war on oil, the war on food, it's the craziest thing. It's madness. And anyone who can't see through that is a fool.
They want us stupid, weak, and unable to think clearly when they try to control us. That's really what it's all about.
You'll own nothing and you'll like it and you'll eat bugs. Not for me, thanks. Well, Sheila, great to spend the evening with you. Thank you very much for working so hard. Our chief reporter, managing editor, and number one friend, Sheila Gunn-Reid, just doing a great job. Special thanks to our folks who were working late. Adam Soos, who was on location in Medicine Hat, and Efrain Osvaldo Flores Monsanto, our head of video.
Gorgeous
here.
name.
Oh, my God, if I had that name, I would use all four names every day, Efrain. It's great to have you working so late and so dedicated as you always are. If I've forgotten someone, Olivia was working for the first half as well. If I've forgotten someone else, forgive me. I know Yankee and some of our social media and web team were working tonight too, so thank you to them. On that note, on behalf of Sheila out west and me here at our world headquarters, to you at home, good night and keep fighting for freedom.